Hey.
Hey, welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, I was about to say I almost did that seamlessly. How are you, Adam?
I'm doing pretty well. Just settling in back to my own place after being on the road for most of the week, so that is always a good feeling.
Yeah.
We have some interesting topics on the docket today, so I'm eager to get down to it. But
I have to say, I kind of just want to continue our conversation last week. I just feel like every time we talk, and I didn't mean this in the best way possible. Every time we talk, I just feel like, I have 20 more things I want to say, but by the time it's gonna roll around again, I'm gonna forget it. I need to start making notes of things that I want to continue talking about, because we had such a great conversation last week about Stephen King, although that was of course far from that's an awesome shirt. That's a great. What was the name of? Okay, this is a good question, because I was trying to think about this when we did our Grease quiz. Okay. What was the name of the high school in Carrie? I know it has a funny in-world name.
Oh,
it's a hard name. It's Voorhees High or something. I know it's.
I don't have that one for you off the top of my head. I would have to check the multiple. That's a good deep cut.
But it is it's a horror movie name, but I can't remember what horror movies were before Carrie. You know what? It's it's Blair. It's Blair High School or Reagan High School or something like that. It's something about The Exorcist. That's what it is.
Really?
Yeah, it's either Blair or Reagan High School, I think. We'll double check that. But anyway, guys, welcome to an all new episode of Why Are We Like This? I'm VideoDrew, and I'm joined by Adam Collins, and we've got Streamlabs open tonight, guys. If you want to go to streamlabs.com/VideoDrew, send in a couple bucks our way. It helps keep the lights on and the guy behind me fed. We have some really fun topics to get to that we didn't get to last week. And I felt really bad because one of the subjects I thought we were going to get to in time retweeted our episode, probably unaware that he was not actually in it. So we are going to get to this week Bret Easton Ellis and Brian DePalma. The two Bs. I think we're both massive fans of both. Adam, I don't want to speak for you, but
yes, no, I enjoy a lot of the work of both of these gentlemen. I still have a few things to check out from them as well. But like most of what I've experienced, obviously DePalma's got some interesting turkeys on his resume, but that's the case for most prolific directors, which makes him interesting. So.
Yeah, it's funny. I was watching a Steven Spielberg. HBO Max does these little biodocs about certain directors, and they're they're kind of propaganda for the directors. I was watching this one on Spielberg, and it was getting me kind of pissed, honestly, because it was him and George Lucas, and I didn't know De Palma was part of their crew or rolled so deep with them. It was De Palma, Lucas, and Spielberg, and they were talking about how they were such outsiders and they weren't accepted in Hollywood, and all the Hollywood movers and shakers considered them to be popcorn movie fluff people and not serious filmmakers. And you're okay, Steven Spielberg, aren't you the guy who's saying that if something's on streaming, it doesn't count as a movie? Aren't you the gatekeeper? You and Scorsese and a couple others, aren't you guys the gatekeepers now? Haven't you kind of lived long enough to become the thing you hate?
Yeah, and Steven has backpedaled a bit on that one. For sure. I think he's signing some kind of deal with Netflix, or was at least considering doing something like that. But I also think he backed off once they figured out how to get, at least certain films theatrically released for Netflix. Yeah.
But it's sort of I guess the David Lynch argument about but David Lynch's argument was never about don't watch movies on your iPhone. That was less about who gets to be counting it as a movie and more just about the media or the size of the screen that you watch it under. It's not saying that if you're doing streaming, your film doesn't count. It was saying you're going to watch a movie, watch it on a big screen.
And not to get too tangential, but that's kind of what we do here.
That's what we do here.
But I just have to say, I picked up on this last week. I saw that part of Josh Horowitz's interview with James Gunn kind of got clipped out because James Gunn was talking about the Scorsese Marvel comic books conversation. And kind of re-sparked that whole thing. And then poor Josh got kind of raked through it on Twitter unfairly because people thought he was just trying to stir the pot, and he was not. He just did an interview.
Did you read the best answer? The best response ever was Zack Snyder's response to this whole situation.
I did not see that.
Oh my God. Okay, so I have it somewhere. He tweeted out, and somebody wrote, so I like this because someone wrote, "This is the most Chad answer you could possibly be giving about this situation." Okay, so where is it? Give me a second. I think I'll have it. Here we go. Found it. It is. I just saw it. It is. Yeah, Zack Snyder is the only CBM director to have a Chad answer, and his response was, "Oh, it's fair. Martin Scorsese is a genius. If you're really good at something, commenting on that world is completely within your rights, and it doesn't diminish my respect for him. I'm certain he wasn't talking about my movies." Laughs. He might have been, but I like to think he wasn't. He meant the other ones, which is just, which is like so perfect because A, no one asked you, Zack Snyder, and B, like, it does bring up an interesting thing that Scorsese specifically said the Marvel movies. Like, he specifically meant the MCU, not like the Batman movies in any capacity. Like, I don't think he would say that about Burton's Batman or anything. You know?
Yeah. And while I respectfully disagree because I like a lot of those movies, I understand his overarching point about a lot of these films don't stand on their own 2 feet given how much context you need for some of them. Yeah.
You know, like I get like you know, it sort of reminds me of the debate. I think it was like 2 weeks ago where people were like, could anyone else have played Tony Stark? And like the answer is like yes. Like there are people that could have played Tony Stark very well and like put a totally different spin on it. The problem is that like we have based these billion-dollar franchises on these people now that are like, you know, Marvel fans don't think of themselves as like Snyderverse type like feminines about stuff, but like they really are. Like they're very protective and they're very like, you know, insular about how they consider like the Marvel MCU content. And it's almost like they have no room for variations. There are no variations in the MCU that exist unless the MCU has decided, unless Kevin Feige has decided it was this way. So there is no like reboot, you know, there is no 8 Jokers in the MCU.
Well, we'll see what happens when this Doctor Strange business comes out.
Yeah, I mean, look how
all the talk of the town.
Right? I mean, like, well, because when Evan Peters crossed over, I got so psyched. Not just because, like, I love Evan Peters and one time we kissed on my birthday, but because, like, you know, I was like, oh,
There's
finally
always a story with you.
This is the best story, but I'm not going to go into it. Everyone else has heard it. But I'm not going to get into it. But I will say Evan Peters was somebody I profiled back in, like, 2016. I remember clocking him in 2011 on American Horror Story and being like, this kid has it. Like, and you know, I like the X-Men for what they are, but like no one's been able to truly like nail it as a franchise yet. And I feel like if they're brought into the MCU, that would be like a cool thing. Like it certainly has helped the Spider-Man stuff reboot. So I'm really looking forward to the multiverse. I think that like, you know, James Gunn even said afterwards, he's like, I mean, his comment was basically that Scorsese was saying what he said during this period because no one was paying that much attention to The Irishman. And so he was trying to get like attention for The Irishman by saying something very like controversial and sort of like a little bit sour grapes about how big the MCU was.
Right.
And I don't believe that's not true. Like the reason Scorsese said anything is because Scorsese was being asked about stuff on junkets. And like I'm sure after enough questions about like how like what does it feel like to go up against whatever movie was going up against The Irishman like the opening weekend. You know, like, what do you think about that? Like, I'm sure after enough times, he's like, yeah, I don't fucking know. Like, I don't know. That's like a whole industry, and I'm just like one guy making films, and they're making a whole theme park.
And it's not something that I don't imagine he spends much time thinking about it.
No.
You know, we do, you know, film fans. But, you know, it's something for fanboys to rally against. But for, you know, people who hopefully have some perspective on it understand that you can still love Marvel movies and Scorsese's movies. Because
well, it's also like, you know, James Gunn has already had the thing where he's already been trying to be canceled. People try to, you know, the studios try to fire him, and like there was such a rally to bring him back. I feel like him and Scorsese are more like aligned than they think they are. Oh, hey, Shug. Says, just wanted to stop by and show some love to Adam. Of course, VideoDREW.
Oh, thanks, Shug.
Hope you're both well and having a good week. Also blame Elmo for everything. Yeah, this was about some great stuff that went on last night on Shug's show. Shug and program. Yeah. Well, it went on for like 3 hours. That's a little noisy. But there's a whole thing about water buffalo edging and Elmo having a late night talk show, and it ended up getting their whole like 5-hour video stream banned. So all I can say to that is, I would make the noise right now, Shug, but I don't want to sound crazy. I don't want to make that Joe Rogan noise.
Well, sorry to hear about that, but
I think they're bringing it back. They'll figure it out. Garth says, "Love what I love, hate what I hate." Yeah, that's a fanboy thing.
Yep, that's more or less how the dialogue goes.
Wait, I can't tell. Garth, are you doing an impression, or is that like actually how you feel about things? Because I feel like that's also how you feel about things. I mean, we all feel that way. We all want people to, besides me, who I kind of like people not understanding the stuff I like, because why would I want everyone to be on the same page as me? I feel like most people want to. This comes from like a genuine place, right? Nobody goes into this being like, I want to like something that like is going to make other people upset or like angry. I guess edgelords do, but mostly we come from places of like severe fandom, and the problem is like the fandom is like gets toxic, I guess.
And I just that just made me think of recently the Netflix Masters of the Universe series, because that was a hot button issue for a week. People were getting stirred up about it, and I was so surprised and amused by it as well.
I mean, I know it's deeply affecting somebody in the Schmoedown community, like making their life kind of hellish right now, and I didn't even consider that would be a thing, like that would ever like affect, like that somebody they would go after like the actual people who work on the show. Like that just seems so out of line with fanboyism stuff, because like Kevin Smith, everyone loves Kevin Smith. Like,
yeah,
fanboys love him. Like,
and
it's weird.
And by the way, Griffin Newman voices Orko in it, and he's great.
Oh yeah, no, that's who I was talking about. No, I wasn't talking about Kevin Smith.
Oh, okay. Well, I honestly did enjoy his vocal performance, and I liked what I've seen of the show so far. I like the old cartoon. I like the movie. I'm very nostalgic for it, like a lot of people from our generation who grew up with it. But I thought this reboot was thoughtful and interesting, and it's not even done yet. It's halfway over and had a fun cliffhanger, so we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think the thing is, and what I've understood about it, I watched part of the first episode. I was on a big He-Man She-Ra thing, but it feels just like the Ghostbuster thing again, of like, you're ruining our childhood. It feels like this real toxic male fandom thing where it's like,
it is very toxic.
Yeah, where it's just sort of like, and it's not even like the people who are actually upset are the toxic people. It's more like the red pill men's right activists are seeing that fans are upset and are jumping on it to be like, it's because it's so SJW, right? Which like kind of like leads to
and that's incredibly reductive, and it's a silly thing to say, because it's a sequel to the original series that's updated for a modern audience, and it needs to be, because the original show is pretty superficial and dumb, and I own the entire box set of the original series just because I do like going back to certain episodes once in a while, but it is so empty. And this new series has a lot on its mind, and they take some big swings, which I really liked with it.
Well, if you haven't seen it yet, I don't.
Oh, I'm not spoiling anything. Go watch the show.
Oh, hey, can you hear me again? Hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, my mic just fell. I was gonna say is I don't want to spoil anything that happens if you haven't seen it yet, but there is a major character who.
Your microphone doesn't want you to speak of this. Can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. I can't hear you. And this is what we call good television. We could sign the rest of the episode. Oh, no dice, Drew. No dice. Okay. All right, so welcome to Why Are We Like This with me, Adam Collins, the co-host of the night. Now, I am looking at the chat. I'm just going to address a couple things in here. Thank you for everyone who's participating. Thrawn, Mike Kalinowski and Dan Merle will back me up that Masters of the Universe is a really fun movie. But if you're watching it now for the first time, it's going to be a tough sell. I'm not going to deny that. Oh, you haven't watched the series, Garth. Okay. Yeah, that's why I don't want to spoil anything. But I definitely recommend you check it out. If you watched the 2001 Cartoon Network series, it felt like it was very much in the vein of that. Whiskey. Well, I don't have any whiskey right now. I might have some in a little bit. But I have a 90-minute IPA from Dogfish Head. They now put these in 6-packs, which makes me very happy. But they hit the wallet, that's for sure. Oh, hey, partner. Wait, can I do things? Can I? No, I don't have highlighting abilities. I apologize. I would highlight the comments if I could. She wants me to say everything in my Werner Herzog voice. Okay. Open the pram. I don't want to lose what audience we have, Marisol, but I appreciate you asking. Yes. So VideoDrew is coming back, but I can give a review of this beer as Werner Herzog if you want me to. This is a bottle of beer, and as you can see, there's a man who's very upset with a clock on his head. Yes, that is him. All right, the improv act is done. But what I would like to encourage everyone to do is check out this Master of the Universe series because precisely because it stirs the pot. That's why I think it's a lot of fun. It goes in directions you wouldn't expect, and the thing that's cool is if someone doesn't give a shit about He-Man, which is the vast majority of people, even though fans of the property would like to deny that, including me, it is precisely the kind of thing that you can jump into if someone's uninitiated and they can just enjoy it. Oh, Werner Herzog voiced an alien in Rick and Morty. I never got that far. So the thing I love about Werner Herzog is the way he pops up in all kinds of shit. Do you remember VideoDrew?
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me? Do you remember?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes. Do you remember Penguins of Madagascar has a Werner Herzog cameo?
Let's say for the sake of the argument, yes. I do.
Okay. So they have like a documentary filmmaker pop in for like a 5-second joke in that movie, and it's Werner Herzog saying the penguins are now going away, and it's from his documentary Encounters at the End of the World, which I can't recommend enough. The one he shot in Antarctica, and he films a penguin walking away to its own death and narrates the whole thing.
So guys, if you ever accidentally took that out instead of the Flight of the Penguins, like that would have been like a very depressing mix-up at the movie store that week.
Well, he even opens up. He's like, I went to Antarctica not to make a film about penguins, but here is a penguin.
Yeah.
And so he talks about it for a while.
He was there to actually make a film about some guy getting eaten by a grizzly bear, and he was like, oh, but here's a penguin. That's interesting.
Well, that one wasn't the Grizzly Man one. This was Encounters at the End of the World, but I love both. But I love all this stuff.
Herzog's decisions about what to take as an actor, like, has always been like, I think, like, belies a whimsical streak we don't really give him credit for. Like all the Harmony Korine stuff, like Julian Donkey Boy, like Mandalorian, like Julian Donkey Boy, he's like running around the front of his house like an Appalachian like crazy man with a gas mask over his face, like he's Dennis Hopper in Blue Velvet. The weirdest iteration of himself. Like he's literally just doing some scary, nightmarish, Lynchian stuff. And I've always really appreciated that he's like, I'm a very serious German documentarian, but also here I am acting like I'm a crazy man, and here
we need to do a whole Herzog episode at some point because I could talk about him for weeks, but I just have to plug a couple things. Incident at Loch Ness, which is a mockumentary he did, which is amazing, where he plays himself filming a documentary about the Loch Ness Monster, and things escalate. Yeah, that's
hilarious. That's like Christopher Guest level good.
It's really, really good. You would probably love it. And then it's just an episode of Parks and Rec, but when he popped up in Parks and Rec, and he's like the property manager or the realtor for Andy and April, and
yeah, I forgot
about
that.
And then it cuts away to him, and he's like, after I sell this house, I am going to fulfill my dream of spending every day in Disneyland.
He's
like
perfect.
It's wonderful.
I forgot. Okay, so here's the list of things he's acted in. Let's see. I have it here. He has 31 credits, several of which are just The Simpsons, because he was voiced in Walter Hottenhoffer on The Simpsons. And he's done Rick and Morty a bunch of times, right? Or like
Right.
he's done Rick and Morty once. He's done the Cleveland Show. I think he's on the Cleveland Show pretty consistently now because I read this like weird article.
Well,
about
he
it.
and Lynch are buddies, which
Lynch are buddies.
And Lynch is on a regular on there as the bartender, isn't he?
That's nuts. He's also he's on American Dad. I guess they've all decided that like Seth MacFarlane's cool. Which is fine. Like I read a tweet last night that I actually put it pretty well. It's like you might feel whatever which way about Seth MacFarlane, but just so you know, David Lynch really likes him. And I was like, oh, fair enough. He's also on. He was on Metalocalypse. He might be on the new cast of Metalocalypse. You know, that was created by the great Jonathan Schneps. He did Penguins of Madagascar. You're right. He did. I'm trying to think. I feel like there's one or two more big.
Jack Reacher was a big appearance of his. He's really cool in that.
Mr. Lonely. I feel like that's familiar. That's
another Harmony Korine film, isn't it?
Oh, is that the one where he is like Michael Jackson? Yeah, it's Diego Luna as Michael Jackson.
Right.
Person. Yeah, so he's really good friends with. I feel like that's the thing. He might like just really like edgelords, or edgelords really like him because like Seth MacFarlane and I mean this like and not as derogatorily as it might seem. I mean like people who like to push the envelope and do kind of racy, kind of non-PC kind of stuff. Like Harmony Korine is very not PC.
Oh yeah, not at all.
And so like he's been in 2 Harmony Korine films and some Seth MacFarlane stuff. I'm like, you know, like that kind of speaks to like a rebellious attitude about stuff. Thrawn saying when I went to see Ellis and Co in San Diego, I walked back into the car and ran into Gene Hoglan. Is that supposed to be Hackman? Hoglan outside of HOB. Gene Hoglan slays. No, I guess that's one name. Gene Hoglan. Who's that? Oh, it's let's see. Love that Monster Squad. Is it something like is Gene Hoglan somebody who was in Monster Squad? Well,
no. No, he's a drummer. I can't. Thrawn, help us with the band because I'm not sure. I just know he's a drummer. Oh, from Metalocalypse, right.
Oh, from Metalocalypse. Oh, gotcha. Oh, like Brendan Small's just my jam, but I was more of a home movies person. I had a boyfriend. Yeah.
Sorry, what were you saying?
I had a boyfriend in college. Like I went to Oberlin, so no big deal. But everyone I dated was like a drummer or like a bassist, so everyone was really into Metalocalypse, and it never like got to me the way that home movies, like the Brendan Smalls' other show, got to me because it was like movie, like kids that love movies, you know.
I just have to call it out while I'm thinking of it. Everyone's saying Nards in the chat because this is a shirt from Monster Squad. That what?
I'm just interrupting your story. Go ahead.
Oh no, that I just wanted to acknowledge it. I'm glad people understand where this shirt comes from. I both enjoy the Monster Squad movie, and I also agree with the message of the T-shirt. Also, because I sadly, the last time I wore this was when we lost to Lightning Time. I wanted to wear it again and give it a new life. So here we are.
I mean, here's the great thing about playing against Lightning Time. I feel like no matter what you wear, like it's always going to be overshadowed by their hat game. Like it is like they are doing some secret wind kind of magic where it's like no matter what they're doing, like it's just going to be about the hats. It's going to be about.
And I like to think we kicked off, you know, their current run, you know, because we were the first one they played in with the hats, and then they went on to beat Danger Zone. So you know, we'll see how they do in their next match, but they got some heat, and those hats. They look good.
I'm always one of these people. I root for people and the teams regardless of faction status or anything like that. And I really do like hope they make it pretty far and go all the way with this because like I think originally last year Ethan wanted me. He's the one who convinced Robert Meyer Burnett to draft me because he's always really liked having female team partners. Like he liked. He just thinks like in terms of that. Like he's like, what would balance me out well? And he just likes working with, you know, like women being one half of the team, him being the other. Like I just really think that's cool because I think a lot of times that's an issue in Schmoedown or like it's kind of ghettoizing to be a woman sometimes. So I've always really appreciated that about Ethan, and I think him and Liz are a great team. As you know, as are you and Marisol, and like so I really do like it when it's sort of a combo that probably just mirrors back me and Tom's relationship.
Oh yeah, you were a trendsetter. And yeah, it's about finding a partner who complements you right. And I have that with Marisol, and he definitely has that with Liz. And and I just, it's hard not to root for them, just like you said. regardless of faction. And they played their asses off against us. And our score wasn't horrible. 33 is enough to beat a lot of teams on a good day. So they scored 37 in that match. They earned their victory. So we'll see what happens next.
I feel the same way that first season watching Brendan and Bibbs play, because, like, you know, I played Brendan in his first match. Not to get too Schmoedown about it, but I played Brendan in his first match. And I remember going into it not knowing what the Schmoedown was, playing it because I really wanted to play the guy from the OA, which was Brendan, and like I was so excited to do that. And being there and being on stage, and I don't remember much about the first time I played Schmoedown, but I remember thinking, okay, so we're like equally good at movie trivia. Like I remember like walking away being like, I lost, but like not by that much, and like we're equally good at movie trivia. And then to like by the end of the season play against him and Bibbs in this like as their like crazy like Shazam mind meld, and realizing like, oh, it's crazy we even got to our 5. Like it is, or they, you know, we pushed them to like their 5 or something, whatever it ended up being. Like I was like, it's.
Oh,
crazy.
That was a great match. Both you and the movie guys pushed them to the brink, and those are both great matches. I
remember being in that match, and like you know, because I didn't really care. I like the attention, but I didn't really care about proving myself. And neither did Tom about like in the movie trivia sense of it. Like I don't think it was like a big like sticking point for us. We hadn't been fans of the show beforehand. Like it wasn't like a point of pride. Like we were just showing up on the weekend to like mess around. And I remember looking over. I was like flying out from New York to LA all the time to do it. So it's not like I didn't care. It's just more like I didn't care about being good at it. So I remember one time when we had just shot our match with Janine and Ethan, and then 5 minutes later we had to turn around and go do the Shazam one. We were given like no time to drink water or anything. Just had to go right back under the lights because it was like scheduling of it. So
that's
it was like
the kind of turnaround,
Yeah, so like I remember getting halfway through, and like you know I didn't do great in the first round. I never really did back then. And getting to the second round, we kind of worked our way through it. By the third round, like I'm just like having fun. I'm like, I can't believe we made it to the semifinals. This is nuts, guys. Like, and I look over and Brendan and Bibbs are like sweating. Like it's clear they're so anxious. Like they were just like freaking. Like Brendan especially is just like freaking out in that way. I think we can now tell in the digital matches. Like he's just like. It looks like he's like having a panic attack under the lights. And like, I think at one point I'm like smearing lipstick all over my face, like eating lipstick. And I look over and I'm like, what? It's just a game. And like, it's in character, but it's also kind of me just being like, what? Like, what's the problem? Like, are we just having, I had no idea of the scope of the community or how much this really meant to people. Like, something people took really, really seriously. I, of course, since learned that, but like watching how far Brendan has come as a player has been like so cool. Like it's, you know, one of the greatest things.
Oh yeah, he's one of the best players there is. He could beat anybody. He could beat anybody.
I wouldn't have gotten that What Lies Beneath poll. I could tell you a lot of things about What Lies Beneath, but not that.
You'll have to take my word for it. I knew that, but specifically because you know I dusted off on that movie not too long ago, and you know I just remember her being big in that era from Lord of the Rings. But for him to do it so quickly, and that's a question most people aren't going to get. Very impressive.
Yeah, I feel like there's certain people who are like my actual traps, like they're trap actors, because like at some point in my life or some point of training, I went, okay, but they'll never ask about this person. Like this person's too deep cut, like Anthony LaPaglia and Miranda Otto for like our horror exhibition match. There were specifically 2 actors that I told NerdChronic, don't worry, they'll never ask about the guy who plays the Boston Empire Records. They're never going to ask about Anthony LaPaglia. Like, that was the thing that kept me from them getting that, and I would have gotten the bonus, and the whole game would have been different. But, like, you know, and Miranda Otto's another one. I'd never seen Lord of the Rings, really, until pretty recently. And I was like, wait, who's that? Oh, she's from, like, Annabelle Creation, I guess. Like, she didn't really stick in my mind as anything, and so I would have no context for her and What Lies Beneath.
Well, her husband is James Remar, and I always kind of perk up whenever he shows up in anything, just because he's such
James Remar.
James Remar. I've heard both pronunciations, but he's been in a lot of stuff. His big break was in The Warriors. He was in that. A lot of people from our generation know him as the second Raiden in Mortal Kombat Annihilation. He was one of the bad guys in the Phantom. What's that?
Warriors. It's not Jerry Horn, right?
I should have led with this. He's Dexter's adopted father in Dexter. That's that's the thing he's known best for. So, but yeah, they're the couple next door. Yeah.
The guy in Warriors who goes, Warriors come out to play is Jerry Horn, and like that took me.
Yeah, David Patrick Kelly. Yep.
I freaking love
I love him popping up in everything. So I would be remiss if I didn't say, Bret Easton Ellis, how you doing? We know you're tuning in.
Oh yeah, hopefully tuning in again. Bret Easton Ellis, the cause of there's a rule in the Schmoedown rule book that might as well be called the Video Drew Bret Easton Ellis challenge, which is the one challenge I made during the Brendan Bids maps. This is the high water mark of my first season was making the challenge.
This blew my mind when I was watching this match back then. And,
did you get the answer? I'm sure a lot of people did. It really threw me the way it was worded. And I feel like.
Well, remind me of if we're thinking of the same thing.
Yeah. So it was. The question was in the genre. It was category number 1. It was in horror/thriller. What horror movie stars Jared Leto, Willem Dafoe, and Christian Bale?
American Psycho. And yeah, you challenged the genre based on the listing on IMDb, correct?
Well, I challenged it based on the fact that the category was horror thriller, but within that subset, they prioritized it in saying not what movie in the category of horror thriller. They said what horror movie, which to me speaks to something that is specifically not a thriller. So something that's realm of the supernatural. It's not a Silence of the Lambs movie. It's a horror movie.
Right.
So I want to pull it. And this was a real stickling point with me because American Psycho was one of the formative books of mine. And movies of mine. Bret Easton Ellis, I got famous on the internet in 2011, for a short period of time. I remember Sarah Palin retweeted this story out. I got hired at Salon, Salon.com to be their first fan fiction editor, correspondent, basically write satirical fan fiction because I had written this piece called Bret Easton Ellis Rewrites the Babysitter Club. So I have this weird ability. It's kind of like my ability to guess movie plots within the first 5 to 10 minutes. I can tell you what the dialogue's going to be. I can tell you what everything's going to be. I don't think anyone really thought it was that big of a deal until I watched Predestination and within 5 minutes was here is exactly how it's going to go.
And the best part of that is it's a film called Predestination.
That's what Bibbs pointed out. But if you've seen Predestination, it's an insane jump. It's like an insane jump of logic to be able to get where I was able to get with it. But it's sort of a weird. I'm not trying to brag. I'm terrible at movie trivia, but I'm very good at
You are not terrible at movie trivia.
But it's not innate. It's not something I can just do and it's second nature to me. I have to sit down and study and it's not everything sticks. But movies, dialogue, plot stuff, it's I do have some sort of weird sense about it. So I was able to guess within 5 minutes of Predestination where it's going, and I have the same ability to sort of mimic a lot of authors' voices. So I'm a really good mimic. So I used to do dating advice columns by Chuck Palahniuk, where I'd go off on a tangent about how to build a bomb, and then halfway through go back to circling around the dating thing. It's very easy for me to read somebody's writing and then immediately be able to write in that style. If I was in Inception, I would be the Bane character, the Tom Hardy guy. I would just be able to take on a new face. So I wrote this thing about Bret Easton Ellis, or I did this thing about Babysitter's Club, and it really took off. It got hugely viral, and I ended up doing a couple more of those. So when I missed American Psycho as the answer, it offended me. Now the question's totally fair. It's a totally fair question. The category threw me off for a second, but in all honesty, I challenged it because Christian before the match was told me in time, he's guys, it's the semifinals. If you guys have challenges, this is where you use it. He was telling us to use it to make it, I think, more exciting, to bring it, because we didn't know the game that well, so we didn't know what we could challenge. And it never struck me as something I wanted to do to challenge somebody else's answer like that. Again, it's just a personal preference. I don't like confrontation. That struck me as something I would rather lose than challenge somebody else's answer on something, because I don't like confrontation like that. But I felt the perfect place for me to challenge an idea, which is that American Psycho is not a specifically strictly horror movie. And Ellis was no, you shouldn't challenge that. I'm not sure if it made it in the final cut, but Ellis was we're gonna just overrule this, so you might not want to do it. And I was I don't know, I feel we were told to take a shot. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna challenge. So they went off and they came back in 5 minutes and they went, okay, yeah, we looked at IMDb. It's listed as a crime, thriller, drama. So I guess, yeah, new question for Drew. And so now there's a precedent in the book that you can challenge, in the rule book, that you can challenge something in a categorical sense. I think Brandon tried it the next season with this isn't an IG movie, but that was a little bit more iffy.
That he wasn't going to win that. They get a list, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like I think that there's some categories where like I think whether or not like how it was released could definitely be called into question. Like I know we have a list of movies that are new releases that have been released not on that have been released streaming, but like that shouldn't count retroactively. Like not every movie that was released as like VOD suddenly counts in the Schmoedown. And I feel like there's some good challenges there if you know where to make them. But yeah, Bret Easton Ellis was a huge inspiration of mine in high school, in college, which is probably like a little bit dark. Like I think I found American Psycho because I read this like my parents had this list of like cool, edgy. My parents were like very edgy, cool people, New Yorkers that were like transplanted to Delaware. But they had this list of like, basically just a book of listicles of like underground counterculture, like verboten, like samizdat, like stuff you weren't supposed to like know about if you were like a normal person. And I think it was called like the indie or like the underground book of cool or something equally pretentious and whatever. That's why I found out about Eraserhead, and they had one list that was just like stuff that's so fucked up that you like if you see it, like you'll never be able to like be a normal person. It was like one of those like total weird things. And one of it was like read the book American Psycho. Like the book American Psycho is so fucked up that if you read it, like your brain will be ever like switched. And so I was like, oh, my parents have a copy of that. So I read it in high school, and I remember being like, oh no, like they're right. Like that book is beyond what I thought. They did a great job of adapting it to the Mary, whatever her name.
Mary Herron.
Yeah, Mary Herron. I wonder if she played Katie Herron from Black Widow. Anyway, she did such a masterful job turning that text, which is just like Fight Club. The text is very homoerotic when you read through the lines because are gay men, and both of them have this like weird fan base of like super hyper bros who want to like emulate the characters in it. And it's like, you know, the irony there is not lost on me, but like Patrick Bateman, American Psycho, the book goes forever. Like it's forever, and it goes into as much detail about those Huey Lewis segments. Like it'll just be page after page of like clearly just Bret Easton Ellis' own thoughts on Huey Lewis and Tina Turner and like different kinds of music. But then there will be equal amount of page dedication, like to how he's like pouring like acid over a prostitute's like nether regions and burning holes into her so he can fit like a hamster tube up her.
Man, you're cutting right to the hits, aren't you?
I remember reading this. I was like
15,
and I was like, what the fuck is this book? Like, what is it trying to say? Like, what is it? Like, what's the point of art that's this intense? And I think it was like a real shock to the system that anyone would have thoughts that are this dark, that they would even like make a book about it. Like, what kind of sicko would do that? And then when I saw the movie, when it came out, I remember being like, I saw it with my parents and remember thinking, I don't think I want to see this movie with my parents, but it's not rated like X, so it must be like they must have cut some things out. And then seeing the movie and being like, oh wait, they did that. They adapted this so brilliantly. They cut out all this like super misogynistic stuff and just kind of made it about the sort of problem that I'm not even sure Bret was that aware of, or he probably was, but he was speaking to a larger generational issue. But I think Mary Herron, like what she did was make it like as much a gender issue as like a decade issue of just sort of like Patrick Bateman is literally every man like on Wall Street. Like he is indistinguishable. Like no one can tell him apart from like anybody else who works at that firm. Like he could be anyone. He could be you. He thinks of himself as like a singular, you know, individual with all this darkness inside of him. But the real horror of it is that like anyone in that world could have that darkness. Justin Theroux, Josh Lucas, like Jared Leto, for all we know. Like it's unclear if any of this was ever real. And I love the way that the movie put that in kind of like a nuanced perspective, because the book is just such a harsh, intensely insane, like just mind trip through like some real darkness. And then when I got older, I read Rules of Attraction, and I think the something Moon or something Lunar Park, and some of his other ones where he puts himself as more of a character, and has Jay McNamara, a really good friend of his, who did some other books around the time, and they were like sort of the Brat Pack of the New York writer scene together, along with the woman who wrote The Goldfinch. They all went to not Bard. They all went to like one school together up in I think New Hampshire. What's like the big indie liberal arts school in New Hampshire that's like very, very hard to get into and like very academic. but like in a very classic
Drew
way.
and Adam, good to meet you at the Cantina, Drew.
Yeah.
As a fan, it was incredible watching a live taping of the Schmoedown.
What?
Love your shirt, Adam. If you got Stephen King on the wheel, would you respin? Also, what is your favorite King movie? Thanks.
Ooh, good question. You know, I'm done with that. So like let's discuss that. If you kept, you don't have to say this, Adam, because of course your secrets are close to the vest, and you have a right to keep them that way. But do you think you know all Stephen King's oeuvre well enough to just dive in and run that slice?
I do like that slice. I will say that, you know, the cat is out of the bag in the sense that, you know, I picked it for Spinner's Choice against Blackjack. So that was, you know, that's why I'm not afraid to wear the shirt. But yeah, I would never spin away from Stephen King. Highly unlikely anyway. I guess I should never say never. But it's also not something I'm going to use every time either.
Would you, okay, so in this scenario where like you like a lot of things on this wheel and you think your opponent might be worse, it's like terrible at King, like you know that might be an opponent's weak spot, would you spin away from it on the hopes that like you'll just land on something else you'll be equally good at, but your opponent might land on, like they'll just have it as a possibility as opposed to taking it off the wheel for them?
I'll say this, you know, like it all depends on who you're playing. But because I'm an out and proud Stephen King fan, it's probably only going to end up on the wheel if I insist that it's on the wheel as one of my choices. So there's a couple strengths that I think all of us can be like straight up about without having to be cagey, and Stephen King is one of mine, and I'm not afraid to share. I mean, he's a specific slice of horror, so and I outed myself as a horror fan a long time ago.
Unlike somebody else's slice preference here, or also yours, he doesn't have just a set number of films. It's not like Lynch where there's like, you know, 9 or 10 films and your opponent can just study those films. It's like Stephen King has written so many things. So much has been adapted from his work. So many things that you're not even sure are Stephen King things are in fact Stephen King things. Stand By Me is Stephen King. Shawshank Redemption is Stephen King. Like there's you know a lot of like non-horror stuff I think people forget is like Stephen King.
People forget all the time, and you know he asked, you know, what's like my favorite Stephen King adaptation, and you know it's hard to say, and we've discussed Mr. King in detail. We'll get back to Mr. Ellis shortly, but I will say out of his adaptations theatrically, you know, I'm a big fan of The Dead Zone.
Really?
Yeah.
Cronenberg that seems like a Carpenter. I think that's like how I can figure out Cronenberg and Carpenter are friends, because that is a Cronenberg movie that seems like a Carpenter film.
Well, and the thing that's cool about that is Dead Zone and Christine came out the same year.
Oh,
so they both had a crack at Stephen King material the same year, and I think those are two of the best Stephen King movies of the 80s. And I'm a big fan, as we've discussed, of like all the weird miniseries we talked about, Langoliers, we talked about Tommy Knockers. We're not going to go through that again right now, but I like those for what they are, even though the effects are hilariously bad. But these newer adaptations are really exciting, and like I'm gearing up to watch Lisey's Story on Apple TV.
Read. That's the one where like she's in the woods, right? And it's like about a baseball. She like keeps using a baseball player as metaphor. Is that something else?
No, this one is about. This is a very personal book of his about how about an author who dies, and it's about his widow and everything, and like how she finds out more about him after he's passed away, and a lot of things happen in the wake of his death that are kind of wild, and you know, kind of make you question certain aspects of reality. So it's a really interesting book, but
kind of sounds like one of his novellas that I'm a big fan of. But I will say that what I think I really love about King, and it's something I love about Joe Hill too, is like he writes in a way that almost is like kind of unadaptable at times. Like I love the adaptations for what they are, but it's like the way Stephen King writes is always from the perspective. It's from the POV of the person who's like experiencing the story, and it switches perspective. It'll be like someone from town or something else, but he's so good at getting into the mentality of people, like especially like scared people, especially people who are doing bad things or wrong things, or like the monsters in his world often get their own POV, and it makes them that much more scary because like we understand that they have feelings, like that they are entities be demonic or evil or whatever, but they still have these very human emotions like fear and love. And I think that's something that like Dr. Sleep as a movie did actually pretty well. It's like if you watch Dr. Sleep the movie, it really comes across. This movie is actually kind of like Rebecca Ferguson being stalked by Ewan McGregor and a super powerful like psychic girl. Like there are parts in that movie where it's just like poor Rebecca Ferguson. All she wants to do is like live forever with her clan of traveling nomads and pick the wrong girl to mess with because they just enact horrifying things upon this evil creature.
I call them recreational vampires.
Recreational vampires, right? I mean, I just thought that I wasn't the hugest fan of Dr. Sleep as a book. I think it read as like a little bit like weirdly sour. A huge fan of the movie. It's the same with Gerald's Game. I wasn't the hugest fan of Gerald's Game, the book. I mean, raise your hand if Gerald's Game is your favorite Stephen King adaptation. Like nobody, or sorry, Stephen King book. Like just full stop.
It's a great adaptation. Yeah.
Great adaptation. Fantastic. Like that's Mike Flanagan just proven his worth because that adaptation is so good and the book is like fine. Like the book is, it's got like a good metaphor. It's got the woman who's like her husband dies in the middle of sex and she's being he chained her up and they're in the middle of nowhere, because they were doing like some kinky foreplay and now she's stuck there and it's like the wolves are howling and they're in the middle of nowhere and there's like somebody maybe prowling around outside, but it's again falls into one of those books. It's not necessarily supernatural. She's just thinking about things.
Right.
And
Lacey's story is a similar setup. But also Misery is an all-time great. And then if people haven't seen it, Needful Things is something they should see. Really fun Stephen King movie.
I know Paul Denuzio has seen it because that's got the Ed Harris. Needful Things is a great one because Needful Things satisfies a part of me that's also like, but I just want to hear about like the objects. Like I want to hear just about the like I want to almost treat it like a card game, like with horror movies. I'm like, tell me about the magical objects. Tell me about all the things that people have in it. Like I'm very materialistic a lot of times.
Well,
Harry Potter's fun in that way.
What I love about Needful Things is it's the book. That book was written sometime in the 80s, I believe, but the movie is a very similar setup to Friday the 13th, the TV series, which, if memory serves, it wasn't about Jason. It was a Tales from the Crypt riff where you would go into this antique shop and you would zoom in on one of the antiques and that would be the story of the week. And
so it's like Cabin in the Woods where they have to pick their object that's going to be their downfall. Like I love that.
Yeah, I like that too. But you've seen that like continued in like Annabelle Comes Home and movies like that, which are kind of fun for what they are. But to bring it back home, I just have to say the first Bret Easton Ellis book I read was American Psycho as well. And it's because I saw the movie shortly after it came out on VHS and was fascinated with it, but I was too young to understand the satire, the commentary. I took it at face value and I just thought it was like a horror comedy like American Werewolf in London. That's how I read it. That's how I read it that simply when I was like, when that came out? I was like 13 maybe when that movie came out, or 14.
I think I was like, I don't know how old you are, but I think I was like it came out in 2001, right?
2000.
Okay, so yeah, I was around 15, 16, around there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I was around the same age, and I just didn't read into it that much, but then I wanted to learn more, so I read the book. And the book was horrifying, but that kind of put it into perspective. I understood more about what the film was trying to say at that point and how it had adapted the book. But like the descriptions of the violence are very jarring, obviously. Yeah. It's like going in and expecting like a horror movie, and instead you get like torture porn. Like everything's like to like the movie Hostel level, but like beyond, or like Martyrs, I guess would be another good like comparison, or like one of those horror movies that's just so graphically sexually violent that you're like, this is not what I signed up for when I wanted to see a scary movie. Like it reminds me of the time that I used to do this thing for The Observer where I would go review like during Halloween season, I'd go review haunted attractions, like haunted parks, in New York. They still need correspondence or
that beat. I mean, I was doing just nightlife stuff, and I just found that beat, and I liked it a lot. But in LA, there was so much more I could have done with that in LA. But like, I was going to like the extreme stuff. So like, I ended up at this one that was called Lights Out, and they make you sign a waiver beforehand, and like can't tell what it's going to be about, and like there's a safe word.
Well, this
and
is like that documentary,
Yeah.
Haunters or whatever it's called on Netflix. That we'll get back to that, but please continue.
Hey, girls. It's kind of like to the point where I just thought that this was like some William Castle style like way to psych you up before the thing.
Right.
You know, you had to go in one at a time, which that immediately struck me as weird. Is like you couldn't go in with anyone else. You had to experience this single, like as a solitary thing, which makes it so much scarier. You're not walking in a group. You have to do this 30-minute excursion like into a dark thing, and like they're just like, okay, so here's like the deal in the waiver, like people can touch you, you can't touch them. Like you will be like bound at some point, so you can't hurt the actors. There will be nudity. There will be like this. There will be that. And I remember being like, okay, like what? Wait, what? Like exactly. And I went in, and it was very graphic. Like it was very much like, oh, I signed up for like getting touched by like naked people covered in what appears to be their own feces, and at one point getting waterboarded by somebody. Like it was just way too
Yeah,
much.
I've heard of these places and this is exactly like the documentary I was thinking of. Haunters, the Art of the Scare is what it is, and it's about these extreme haunted houses. Yeah,
extreme haunted houses. I heard there's one like in Florida that no one has ever been able to get all the way through because it's so violent, so physically harmful, like so traumatizing that like, and I'm like at a certain point that's not like scary, that's just like upsetting. Like there's a difference between like being like I want to be in a horror movie and get scared, and being like I want to go to Guantanamo Bay and be assaulted. Like there's
So the thing I did not like in the documentary was like they like lock you in a coffin and like spit fake vomit in your face. I just don't understand this kind of stuff. It seems very fetishistic, and I would get no enjoyment out of it whatsoever personally. I want to be convinced that werewolves and ghosts exist. That's what I want.
It's sort of like how it's almost lazy because it's like saying like, yeah, if I break your kneecaps, you're gonna scream. That's how much I'm gonna scare you. And it's like, no, that's like violence. That's different. And like you're not eliciting any creative, like you're not making my brain like imagine things that aren't there. Like the greatest counterpoint I think to that, and I think like the greatest counterpoint between American Psycho the book, which serves its purpose. It's very shocking, and it's supposed to be because it's supposed to be this commentary on this sort of like sort of veneer of like just being a master of the universe, to bring it back in the 80s. These men who like seemed to have it all together. They were rich, they were powerful, they were stockbrokers. Bonfire of the Vanities by Tom Wolfe, which was made into a movie by Brian DePalma, a very famous flop, is also kind of about that, but takes a much different track about like the inside of the mind of one of these masters of the universe. And really at the end of the day, it's about privilege. It's about like how much privilege, before there was like really a term for it, like before this whole like idea of privilege became like a big talking point, it was really just trying to shock you into recognizing how much privilege these men felt entitled to. And it goes so graphically into it, but it's supposed to shock you. It kind of like, as opposed to, I feel like the movie, which does it in this way that makes your imagination work. And like the idea that Willem Dafoe is like he shot every single scene he's in 3 different ways. He was told to film it like he knew Patrick Bateman did it. Like he thought that Patrick Bateman didn't do it, and that he was on the fence about like what this guy's deal was, and he didn't know which like of the scenes would make it into the final cut, and they just like mashed them all together. So like one of the scenes is a take where he thinks that Patrick did it, and one of the takes is like a scene where he's like playing it as if he doesn't know, and one of the takes he's actually playing it like he thinks Patrick's innocent. And like that's the kind of like brain tease I like in my cerebral horror films.
And that's why it was such a trend-setting movie in a lot of ways. I really, really love Willem Dafoe in that role because he takes the needling detective bit to a new level because he's Willem Dafoe. Just the way he stares at Christian Bale unnerves him, makes him second guess the veneer he puts up for everybody. And what I was going to say about the book, with all the violence, it seems gratuitous at first, and then you start to get the book takes on a very poetic rhythm between the scenes of violence and the descriptive scenes about the music, and and they're both obsessive, to your point earlier, and it's really jarring to read those scenes of violence, and then you kind of get these relief chapters where he's thinking in his head about how much he hates these people he's having dinner with, how much He's obsessed with Whitney Houston's entire catalog, whatever the case may be. And
he needs to go see Les Mis. Like it is. There are some in jokes they keep in the movie. Like the stuff
and
about,
they capture it captures the late 80s so vividly too.
It does. Yeah. And the stuff about the restaurants, like the food, like the opening shot of American Psycho, the movie, is so great because it really does encapture, like, and it does in a perfect way, give you what a lot of those books chapters were, just long descriptions of food, and then long descriptions of like hurting women, and then long descriptions of like his thoughts about an album, and it's just hypnotic after a while.
Oh, I love it, and the movie captures it really well. I think getting Mary Herron to direct it was a brilliant choice that, was really not very common at the time. And she found a way to not subdue the material at all, but like adapt it appropriately, because I don't need to see everything literalized from that book. I don't want to.
Shied away from the violence. That scene with like the hookers and the chainsaw and stuff, like him looking in the mirror and like, doing that whole thing. I mean, it does get to the point. It just doesn't do it for like, because it's a movie. It can't inherently. If it was a TV show on HBO Max, maybe they would just make it violent and like graphic and have like a lot of conversations about like consensual or like non-consensual rape in TV, and we'd have the whole conversation again. But like, this was a movie. It had to be a static amount of time. They were going to do this much with it, and she still managed to get like a lot of the graphic and violence against women in there. And the Feed Me a Stray Cat, like his disdain and hatred of the homeless is also like really poignant.
That scene, that was the first movie I ever remember seeing where like I noticed Reggie Cathy like standing out in a role as Al, the homeless man. And I just, he's been in a ton of stuff. He's been in a lot of television as well. If you look up Reggie Cathy, you realize.
I feel like that name sounds familiar. Is it the guy? Oh, is it the guy from House of Cards?
Yes, he's the barbecue shop owner in House of Cards, and then for IG fans, he's in 2015's Fantastic Four, and he's also in Tank Girl.
I also got it. By the way, I just for my own edification here, I want everyone to know that I got that right before I pressed thing on Google. I was like, wait, Reggie? Oh my God, House of Cards guy. So I got that before Google then gave me the results. Just FYI.
Well, I believe you 1,000%. But he's a very talented actor, and that scene is just, it's horrifying to watch. And it's his character embodies not just yuppie culture. Like you look at something like Wall Street, which is very obvious in its indictment of the era, which I understand. I get Oliver Stone was doing his thing, but it's heavy-handed. And so is American Psycho, but it's more nuanced at the same time.
It's a satire. It's like a perfect satire because it's both nuanced, but it's also making you like think about like, oh man, could I get reservations at Dorsia, or like would I be stuck at this other restaurant? People forget that Reese Witherspoon has one of her greatest comedic turns in this movie.
She's so good. The way she ignores him.
The way she ignores him, like she's just like, he'll be saying he's like, I murder a bunch of people, and she's just like just like ignores him because either he's not saying it out loud, or she just like really doesn't fucking care because like her world is so vastly different than like she's sleeping with somebody else. Like the fact that like and when he tries to break up with her and she's like, well, Patrick, we can't break up. Like we have the same friends. And he's like, I thought about that. And it turns out you can keep them. You can keep them.
Like, you can have them.
You can have them. That felt so, I mean, as a kid, if we had never gone through like a divorce or a breakup, I remember being like, this feels very legitimate to like, you feel for him in that moment. Like he's so desperate to get out of the situation. That she feels like he's the threat. And
she's like, what am I supposed to do? And he's like, you want to know what you can do? You can stop making this scene right now.
Yeah, stop making the scene. Like, he's so tight-lipped about it. There's so many good small parts in that. Like, the people who just weren't famous yet. Like, Justin Theroux, like, being the guy who's, like, he's freaking out at the, when he's doing coke.
Timothy Bryce, yeah.
Yeah, he's freaking out when he's doing coke at the club, like, in the bathroom stall, and he punches the wall, like, at the thing next door, and he's like, sorry, man, roid rage. Like, the whole scene with the whole scene where he's doing the card thing. I mean, that's a very iconic scene with the raised letterhead. And I mean, Eric NerdChronic actually does a pitch perfect note for note impression of that entire scene. Like he can do that whole voice.
I don't doubt it. And fun fact about me, surprise, I went to theater camp for a few years when I was a teenager.
That is a surprise, actually.
No, I loved it. It was a lot of fun. And it wasn't just theater. Like, it was like media arts and like radio at, like, they had like they had like a limited frequency radio station there, and I got
That's cool.
like, it was just a really cool place. And I remember they had a monologue and dialogue night every summer, and you could audition with a monologue or a dialogue with one other person from anything, movie, TV show, play.
Oh my God.
And I had transcribed a bunch of scenes from American Psycho, and I had done the business card scene, and I also transcribed the scene where he murders Jared Leto, and they ended up letting us do the Jared Leto one.
Oh my God.
And the best part about it is the only prop I had was a giant like cardboard battle axe from like some like silly musical from earlier in the summer, so that was my axe. But me and my buddy acted it out verbatim. And
I just have an idea. If we get to $100 by the end of the night, I'm gonna have you and NerdChronic do a Patrick Bateman off. We're gonna bring this in. We're gonna have you guys Patrick Bateman off.
Oh God.
Allen scene, or we're gonna do the letter scene, and you guys are just gonna, because that would make me happy, and I think it would make the audience happy. So that's what's gonna happen.
I'll give you okay. Look, I don't have the entire scene memorized like I used to, but one thing that always sticks out in my memory, they're like, some guy's like, nice color, and then Christian's like, that's bone.
That's bone.
And the right, what does he say? And
Eric's
and
like,
the font is something called Cillian Braille. I can't remember it verbatim. I'd have to look it up.
You got it. And he goes, oh my God, is that a watermark? I can't believe Bryce prefers Paul's card to mine.
Yeah.
Or not Paul, because it's
Van Patten. He said, I can't believe Bryce prefers Van Patten's card to mine.
Yeah. Well, I also, Justin Theroux's reaction when he first opens up the thing, he goes, is that blow? Like, he's got one note the entire movie, and that's that he wants drugs, and he's also sleeping with Patrick's girlfriend. And everyone's confusing the two of them because, like, you know, everyone confuses all of them together. Like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like, none of this matters because this either didn't happen or everyone's doing it and who cares. Look, NerdChronic is going, oh my God, it even has a watermark. The way he's sweating.
The tasteful thickness of it.
Yeah, the thickness of it. Oh my God, the way that he smiles and he's just like, he's sweating. He does that little like smirk when he's, you know, puts his like little lip up a little bit.
It was like, Patrick, are you okay? You're sweating.
Yeah, he's so good. That's the other guy who's great. The guy who plays the Hooli boss on Silicon Valley. He's in a lot of the not Hal Hartley. He's in a lot of the Whit Stillman movies. Like he's in Metropolis and Last Days of Disco. Redhead dude. He's the Hooli boss. If you see Silicon Valley, he plays the gay coworker of Patrick. So Patrick's sleeping with his fiance, who's like, you know, she's clonopined up. She's like a clonopinata. The whole thing is just full of side characters who I think are just as perfect, if not more so, and deserve equal amount of recognition as Patrick Bateman as a character. Yeah,
and I love the way they all blend together, but Lewis does stand out. I did look him up just to jog my memory. His name is Matt Ross.
Matt Ross, that's right. Yeah, if you watch The Last Days of Disco, he's fantastic in that. He's also, he just plays a lot of these guys, like a lot of, for lack of better words, like elite poofs, like New York, like, you know, what you consider like a New York dandy type. In that role. I think, like, you know, Whit Stillman kind of transferred over, and I think when he's been Damsels in Distress, I think Zach Wood from The Office plays a lot of those characters for Whit Stillman too. Like, it's sort of like this pretentious, but also sort of like fey and like not like effeminate, not like necessarily, you know, into men, but like definitely like a sort of like weak or like, you know, like a, you know, aristocratic sort of man. Is sort of like a, you know, cerebral kind of man. I don't know. Very
much. And one of my favorite parts with Matt Ross is when he sees the Bateman has the body bag, and he's like, where did you get that overnight bag? And he throws it into the taxi. He's like, Jean-Paul Gaultier. And he just slams the trunk shut.
There's another scene where, like, any scene where Patrick is getting freaked out by a woman is like one of my favorite scenes in the movie. There's the one where he's putting in his dry cleaning. He's like yelling at in very racist words. He's yelling at the Chinese laundromat. And then someone goes, oh my God, Patrick, and turns around. It's an old girlfriend who in the book, I think, has a much larger part. She's a girlfriend that who he remembers as like sort of the goodness in him, and he's trying to get back together with, but she has like no interest. She kind of sees the awfulness in him, but like he's writing her poetry, all this stuff. I think that's who that character is supposed to be. But like when she sees him, he's like, oh, sorry, this is all, this is all cranberry juice stains. And she's like, well, Patrick, we should like get together sometimes. And he's like, yeah, sorry, but I've got to go. And she's like, well, let's get together next week. And he's like, ooh, he's like, when's that? And she's like, well, and he goes, oh, I got tickets to Les Mis. I got to go.
He's like, I got a matinee to Les Mis.
She's like, Patrick, I didn't even say what day it was. She's just like, it's so good because he's terrified of the women in this film. Like he's terrified of them in a way that he's not terrified of the men.
And that's what makes Chloe Sevigny's character very interesting as well. I could go on and on about American Psycho, but I have to encourage people who haven't read the book to do so because it does capture the moment really well. As long as you have a stomach for, very descriptive violence.
And also for length, it's also just it's very long. It's very wordy. Like it's also like essays in there. So it's half of it's just going to be opinions about stuff, man. I would also say Rules of Attraction is where I would tell people to start if they haven't read Bret Easton Ellis.
That is a good entry point, and I did look up the college. Marisol was in the chat earlier, and she mentioned Dartmouth, which was a good guess. It was Bennington College. Yeah, and I've been to Bennington, Vermont several times for work. I didn't go to that school myself, but Rules of Attraction is very much based on his college life.
So if you read in Donna Tartt, the person who wrote The Goldfinch, but she also more importantly to this conversation, she wrote this great book called, what was it called? I'm gonna look it up right now. It's called it was her first book. It was this huge debut, and it's very dark. It was called The Secret History, and it's about these classic students. So they're like these very cerebral kids at a school like Bennington. It almost feels like it's an extension of Rules of Attraction because it's about these like very rich, very kind of elite kids who form this society because they're all classics majors and they're trying to be more in touch with like the classical. Homer and all this stuff and Homer's not even one of the characters, but they find this mentor who's one of the teachers and they all talk about like Rome and all this stuff. And then there's a murder and they just completely within the group, they all disintegrate and become like crazy people. And I think I think there's something about Bennington. Yeah, they don't give grades in that college. It's kind of like that other school, St. Anne's, not St. Anne's, there's one in New Mexico and there's one in Maryland. But it's like a school that doesn't give grades and everyone learns the same things. It's college, but you learn the same things at the same time, everyone in your year. So you learn Latin. The next year you learn Greek. Then you learn like the higher maths. And then you learn then you have to do the thesis your like fourth year that's like in these just these very like archaic, no longer really relevant or very much but very cerebral. And it's like a place where I think has a very high like suicide rate because it's like for overly smart people who are just kind of spinning their wheels on these, erudite subjects that don't really have a practical real-world application. So, but I think when schools like Bennington and schools like this sort of like lend themselves to people who naturally are attracted to, I don't know, like this higher, darker way of thinking. I'd put it.
Well, Rules of Attraction captures that beautifully, and it is set in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. And fun fact, Sean Bateman, James Van Der Beek's character, who is Patrick's little brother, which is that's the much more explored in the books, which is kind of cool. He is originally supposedly from Berlin, New Hampshire, which coincidentally is a town very near where I live.
Patrick grew up. They have different mothers, right? Because Patrick grew up there. No.
Patrick was a bit older, but I can't remember if they had different mothers.
I think it's his half brother because Patrick mentions him in American Psycho, the book. Patrick's talking about how like he kind of hates Sean for these reasons, but like he also really wants to impress the brother. I feel like it's a half brother. I'd have to
that wouldn't surprise me. But what was interesting is like they tried to get Christian Bale to do the movie when Roger Avery was doing Rules of Attraction, and he wasn't available. And they were very close to recasting Casper Van Dien to play Patrick Bateman in like one.
Very good.
He would be very good. Yeah.
I think James Van Der Beek was really good. I think like you could have gotten the good thing about both Patrick. I think Christian Bale's performance is perfect. It is so spot on. The fact that I learned about that he had studied Tom Cruise's interviews to get Patrick Bateman down. Like he's doing a Tom Cruise impression. Like that is, he was like, how do I go dead behind the eyes? How does it look like I'm smiling all the time without really giving anything away? How does it look like I'm just like kind of like clicking away in an alien reptile part of my brain? It's kind of like that show You that I really like, which is another fantastic adaptation from a great book. the Caroline Knopf books. It's about like a stalker, like a crazy guy, but he presents as normal. He presents as handsome. He's a book guy who like works in a bookstore in New York, and he really he falls for this girl, but he's like stalking her and like doing stuff in her life, like murdering people and stuff. But like you only get his POV, like Patrick Bateman's, and in his mind, he's like saving her, and like he's being a white knight, and like it's just doesn't it stop that men don't know how to treat women these days. And I think it's both the book and the series is the closest thing we have to a social satire that's as good, if not better, than American Psycho. And I think the cool thing about characters like that, although Penn Badgley plays them incredibly well, is that you can just hire an actor who's not that good at acting, and it will work just as well. Casper Van Dien, who is, I think, a pretty good actor, like he just got cast in a lot of strange movies. You just need a guy who's handsome in a cipher. Like you could get any generically handsome guy, and they could just. That's the whole point of them. They can just not do very much behind the eyes.
Absolutely, and ultimately, I'm not upset that Patrick Bateman was left out of the Rules of Attraction film, because I don't think that connective bit between the stories would really have any relevance beyond fans of the source material. Rules of Attraction is a very different story. There are overlapping themes for sure, but he's not a sociopath
in the same way. He's narcissistic, but he's not like a murderer. Like Sean is. Right. Sean is more like just like caught up in like the same bullshit that everyone in the college is caught up on, which is like, he's obsessed with this girl. Doesn't like, but he's not like actively, just like going around serial killing people. That's not like his deal.
Right. Right. But what the story, what the book and the film speak to is a lot of the, the predatory nature of a college campus. And just because there's this high-minded idea of academia behind it, and everyone goes in trying to impress each other, at the end of the day, they're still a bunch of savages.
So I think so it's Jay McNamara. I forgot they had a name for each other. I think it was something that was sort of like a play on the Brat Pack, but it was like something that was even like weirder. So it was Donna Tartt, Jay McNamara, and Jay McKierney, who did Bright Lights Big City, and Bret Easton Ellis, and they'd all gone to Bennington together, and like all their books kind of like reflect a version of Bennington that is very like, I guess the equivalent today would be like Promising Young Woman kind of like addresses it. It's like sort of gray area in which like evil is allowed to flourish as like the idea of, well, it's just, it's these high-minded, brilliant college like kids. Like what, they can't do anything wrong. Like whatever they do is innocent. They were just kids, It's like the idea that date rape can only happen when it's like lunk-headed frat boys, as opposed to like, academic classic students or something. The idea, my friend Teddy Wayne wrote this great book called Loser, that's basically from the POV of like what you call like a beta cuck nice guy on a college campus who like, he thinks the whole world's against him, and girls never like him, and he's always forced into the friend zone, and he does acts of horrific like violence, and you just see him justify in his head at why he's doing it, because like, because in his mind he's not getting a fair shot. Like it's in his mind, it's not rape, it's not anything. It's it's just so much loathing is there, because it's like I've been kicked down and I've been a nerd my entire life. Like nerds aren't as that somehow like nerds are less dangerous than jocks. Like that we've had this idea, when in fact I think they can be as dangerous, if not more so, because of their intelligence and the bitterness that they've had like accumulated around their situation. I mean, that's just more like a general commentary, but I do think it's like an interesting thing that wasn't getting parsed that much, and I think the Secret History does it really well. I think Rules of Attraction does it really well. Because the three main characters, we have a best friend of Sean, who's this gay guy who's in love with Sean, and it's almost like he's just as dark as the rest of them, and like Sean doesn't see it, so Sean is like the innocent of that dynamic.
That's Ian Somerhalder's character, right?
Somerhalder's character, and he's like he's obsessed with his best friend.
He's quite good in the movie.
Oh, he's great in it. But they even have a song that's sort of like a throwback to the sequence in American Psycho, The Hip to Be Square, except they're doing George Lucas's Faith. George. I
would love to hear George Lucas's Faith, but yeah, George.
Faith, which is Jedi.
Yeah, George
Michael's Faith, where they're like him and another gay son of like his parents' friends, like go to a hotel, and their parents are like getting drugged up and like taking their Valium and at the dinner table totally out of it, And so him and the guy go up and they just start dancing on their bed to Faith, and like they're just like having like a wild time. It's actually kind of a beautiful carefree moment, but it's also very dark that like their parents are just so out to lunch. That's a recurring theme in his books. It's just the parents exist, but they are so out to lunch, and they are so like, they're so just addled with pills and stuff that they're not really even adults, let alone parents. He had another one. He has a couple more that have been turned into movies that like I don't think made any splash at all. I think one was the one that's sort of about vampires, like they're sort of like social vampires or emotional vampires, I guess you'd call them. The Olsen twins were in it. I believe who's the kid from Terminator 2? Edward Furlong's in it. I forget the name of it. Let me check it out real quick. But that one's also like, I remember the book is vastly better than the movie version, which I believe was only VOD. But
he had a few things adapted. I never saw The Informers. That was the 2008 one.
I think that might be was it The Informers? The Less Than Zero is another big one of his.
That was from the 80s.
It's Glamorama, I believe. Yeah, Glamorama.
Glamorama. Okay.
Yeah, I believe that it's the idea of like celebrities as sociopaths and these vampires who like come and feed off of them. It's about a lot of tabloidism, and it's really interesting. So it's sort of just like about he writes a lot about the vapidness of like between cultures. There's just like a lot of vapid stuff going on. Less Than Zero is fascinating because he wrote that while still a student at Bennington. He was like 21 when he wrote this novel, and that's like what catapulted him to a level of super stardom, and within the at the time he could be a superstar of the literary world that like made him such a name. Like he was like a precocious Lena Dunham-esque like fame baller. Like he was, imagine being in college and writing something that like gets you that famous. So Less Than Zero is basically like a precursor to what Rules of Attraction would be, and it's just about like the POV of like this guy Clay who is like coming home from like to Los Angeles for winter break. They made it into a movie with Robert Downey Jr. very famously. And they kind of created this morality tale about it, which doesn't really fit the themes of the book, which is like, again, vapidness, like antisocial, themes of like, it doesn't really matter, nothing means anything. Everyone's just sort of like a consumer whore. But in the movie, they made it a sort of, parable about vice and doing drugs. And I guess Robert Downey Jr., like Tony Stark being friends with Ultron way before any of this other stuff happened. Like that's the funniest thing to me. It's like, there's these moments between Robert Downey Jr. and what's his name?
James Spader.
James Spader, where like James Spader, I don't know what happened to James Spader, but like you watch Sex Lies and Videotape, you watch the early James Spader stuff. Who he was like has transformed so completely. His voice is completely different. His mannerisms are like different. He used to have this very like soft, like very like almost high pitched like voice. He used to like.
Well, go back and watch him in like Pretty in Pink. Because he's really, really like he plays Steph the prep, and he's really, really young in that. I need to see Less Than Zero. I really do, because that cast is stacked, and then no less than Weekend at Bernie's own Andrew McCarthy is the star. So I definitely have to see it for that reason.
I mean, no less than Jamie Getz. The Lost Boys, Jamie Getz is like in it.
Oh, Jamie Gertz?
Gertz, sorry, yeah, Jamie Gertz. Brad Pitt has this I think is Brad Pitt's technically his first role. This was, I think, before Bronny.
Is he like a waiter or something?
He's just like he's like an extra in it. Like he's just an extra in it. But like I remember in the movie, it's like he's anti-drugs, and like Spader kind of convinces him to go into the world of drugs, and like it's this whole thing. And I think spoiler, I think he like overdoses, and it's this whole metaphor. And Robert Downey Jr. is his druggy friend. Andrew McCarthy's the anti-drug guy. He's the main character. But like it's just totally different from the book, and it has this like real sort of like morality clause to it that like just is non-existent and back antithetical to the themes of the story. So yeah, I just would suggest if you want to start with like a good one, I'd say Less Than Zero is great as a book. I think that like I really, really like Rules of Attraction. You really, just like Stephen King, you really get into the head of these characters. You can hear the world from their rationalizations and how they see things, and it really, it's like absorbing. Like it totally like it's like a 360 degree. It's an immersive experience to read his novels like that. I love Jamie Nichols.
Hey, how's it going? And the thing I like about Rules of Attraction is it's very quietly set in the 80s. Like they don't call a ton of attention to it, but that's like one of those, like American Psycho is more obvious about it. But Rules of Attraction acknowledges that it's the 80s, but like, you know, it's not.
I never realized it. Of course it has to be because Sean, but I guess I just thought that they were doing a hipster thing of like liking anachronistic music. Like, you know, a gay kid liking George Michael is not that out of place in the time and the day that like the 90s or whenever this was taking place or when it came out, the odds. But you're right, because of the very famous suicide scene in that movie. It's like she's listening to like a little radio, right? Like one of those little transistor radios.
The only thing that makes it seem anachronistic is Shannon Sossaman's hair, because she always had that interesting. That was her trademark for a while.
I liked Shannon Sossaman. That I also liked. Was that Jessica Biel? I liked Jessica Biel as the roommate in that. She has.
Oh yeah.
She starts getting this nosebleed while doing a lot of coke, and she goes, "Uh-oh." She goes, broken or busted pipe, and like it was the first time I'd ever heard a phrase like that, and I like thought that was so clever and cool. I was like, I think it had the opposite effect it was meant to. I was like, I should do cocaine and see if like my nose bleeds, and then I could busted pipe. Like it was just cool, like a Wallace like snort a line of like a coke in the bathroom and go, God damn, you know, like it just seemed they made it seem very cool to be doing drugs.
No, Rules of Attraction made drugs seem like the best, and that cracked me up. Oh God, what was I going to say? I'll come back to it, but Fred Savage.
Oh my God, Fred Savage. Dude, this was before Fred Savage was reinventing himself as the guy who like directed all the Always Sunny episodes. There's a scene where Fred Savage, who we just all know as the kid from Boy Meets World, shows up as like a heroin junkie who is injecting needles.
Fred was Wonder Years. Ben was
Wonder Years. Sorry. So the Wonder Years kid injecting the Princess Bride kid, injecting heroin straight into his toes, like he's just playing the oboe. Is it the oboe or the clarinet?
I think it's a clarinet, but yeah, he's like leaning back and playing it like it's squeaking and it's piercing. It's like nails on a chalkboard.
It's like you just never expect. It'd be like Michael Cera doing it like years ago, or like it's like Jason Bateman's role in Smoking Aces. You know, like you're just like, whoa, wait, like that squeaky clean guy doing this kind of drunk junkie role. No one saw it coming. It was such a good cameo. I totally forgotten about that.
Oh, he's wonderful. He's wonderful.
Who did you say directed that?
Roger Avery. He collaborated with Quentin Tarantino on the story for Pulp Fiction, I think.
Right, there we go.
That was his big claim to fame, and then.
No wonder there's a feet scene.
Yeah.
No wonder there's that scene in that movie. That's right, because Paul Schrader also collaborated with Bret Easton Ellis on The Canyons, and also collaborated, with Scorsese and Taxi Driver. He works with a lot of these co-collaborator types. They're like big names.
Look, Drew. I don't want to. We gotta talk about Brian DePalma.
Oh yeah.
Maybe this would be a quick transition. Hopefully, but I just have to say, both of the Exorcist prequels are bad movies. But it's so amazing watching them back to back. It is a fascinating, like
ones, right? Like the recent prequels.
So Exorcist, the beginning, and Dominion prequel to The Exorcist that came out in 2005 and 2006. They're essentially the same movie,
right?
But Rennie Harlan made Exorcist the beginning, and Paul Schrader did Dominion, the prequel to The Exorcist, which was technically filmed and completed before Exorcist the Beginning was released, and then they. The studio wanted them to remake the movie with more violence because of Saw and Hostel.
Were we talking about this the other day, or I can't remember? I didn't do so much.
No, we haven't discussed this yet.
Oh my God, this exact thing came up in a study session recently, and we went over, and I was like, wow, this sounds like a trip. Like this double feature.
I years ago I picked up Exorcist the Beginning and Dominion and they're like in the same DVD pack, and like again they're both bad. Okay. But it's one of the rare instances where a studio finished a film and then they said, we need to remake it with more or less the same cast. They kept Stellan Skarsgård and a few other people. He's the star of both movies as the young Max von Sydow, Father Merrin.
I feel like there is one more example of that being done. Like it's not Rumble Fish and the Outsiders, which were very close, but like of that being done, like a specific studio cut. It's not even a studio cut. It's like a different movie, but it's it's theatrically released.
I'm sure you could find examples, but in like the 2000s, it was really weird because they release Exorcist at the beginning, it doesn't do great, and then they release Dominion a year later, and people thought it was a different movie, and it made less than $1 million, I think.
It was kind of like a Space Jam New Legacy thing where it's like almost like it was made by an algorithm. Like it's like, what if you gave a studio movie to direct? Like, how would that look?
Well, it was confusing to people because Paul Schrader's movie was in the can, and Rennie Harlin's came out first, and then Paul Schrader's came out a year later, and they were more or less the same movie, and with a few different cast members, and it had to be so confusing. I just imagine someone going into Dominion, having seen Exorcist at the beginning the year prior. And
I'm not saying that like don't do this, PJ. PJ's like, don't do this, PJ. Don't ever do this to us, PJ. But like, if you're gonna do it to anyone, like, give it to me and Adam so we can like nail this. But like, that's so like, if you can write a question that's about like one of those movies and not the other, and like trip somebody up that way.
That's
same cast. It's just a year difference.
Drew, that's how I eliminated Andreyko, Franco, and Preston in the horror free for all. Is because I knew Rennie Harlin. They asked. They asked which Exorcist movie was directed by Rennie Harlin. I knew it was Exorcist at the beginning, and they all guessed 2 and 3, and 2 or 3 essentially. So that
even it wasn't even like the right trip up.
No, but like there's so many more questions you could ask about both of those movies, and the thing that's insidious about it is they were both theatrically released. So it's just But Paul Schrader is such a talented writer, and he's and then like he's directed films as well, and
did he direct First Reformed, or am I crazy?
Yes, he did.
Okay, I was watching Bringing Out the Dead on Twitch stream once because no big deal. I'm an affiliate on Twitch and I can do that with Prime stuff. So I was watching Bringing Out the Dead, and I was like, this seems depressing actually for a film to be watching with a group of people and trying to Mystery Science Theater over it. So I was like, you know what? I've heard about this horror movie. People keep recommending First Reformed. I'm going to put that on instead. Put that on and realize I've committed to another Paul Schrader film. And that, like, I get like 90 minutes in and I'm like, oh, this isn't a horror film at all. Or it's horrifying, but First Reformed is not a, like, supernatural horror movie. It's like an environmental, horrifying parable about eco-terrorism and religion. It's very dour.
He's got a lot on his mind. I'd say his strongest directorial effort for me is Affliction with Nick Nolte and James Coburn from '98. It's a really good Sissy Spacek's in it, and James Coburn won the Oscar for it.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, like, for him to end up doing Dominion, prequel Exorcist, like 8 years later, I don't doesn't track for me. But
I love this though. I mean, this is the kind of John Patrick Shanley. Sorry, I forgot his name for a second. John Patrick Shanley thing where it's like, I mean, I really respect Griffin Newman for doing this, like a blank check that this is what the podcast is going through people's like entire oeuvres and being like, you know, like from beginning to end, and be like, you know, because James Mangold fascinates me. How do you like go from one kind of project like Kate and Leopold and do Wolverine, and like how do you like, you know, with so many people are like auteurs and they only do certain kinds of films, to be able to be like a journeyman, especially a screenwriter journeyman, and just like do, you know, what the studio wants, or like be like Soderbergh and do like one for yourself, one for the studio, one for yourself, one for the studio,
right?
And make like weird shit on the side, but then also make like the Ocean's movies. Like, it's fascinating to me. But there's a great roundtable that came out a couple years ago that was like, who was it? It was Paul Schrader, it was Bo Burnham, John Krasinski, and then the woman who made who wrote Slums of Beverly Hills, Tamara Jenkins, and then it was also Peter Farley. And it's like a 2-hour-long roundtable. Wow. And my God, you cannot get like a more. It's almost like it could be a Christopher Guest movie at parts. Like it's almost like a Curb Your Enthusiasm, because it's not quite cringe, but it's definitely like awkward and like strange that these people are being asked, like these specific set of people. Like John Krasinski's like, yeah, I was handed a script and I was like, hey, yeah, maybe I'd like to direct. And then like I decided to change the movie around, so now it's about like family. And then Bo Burnham's like, yeah, I'm just kind of like and he's like very quiet and soft spoken. He's like the one who talks the least in it. Whenever they direct a question towards him, like Paul Schrader's like ranting, and there's another old Hollywood guy there who's like just ranting about like the system and the way it used to be, and has all these old stories. And then Peter Farley's there, you know, talking about like his Green Book kind of stuff that's not exactly PC. And then once in a while they ask a question of Bo Burnham or the woman in the group, and Bo's always like, yeah, I don't know, I'm only kind of interested in the experience of what it's like to be a teenager in America right now, like because I came of age in the internet, and like and part of me is kind of stuck there, and I think it's really fascinating that like that like the way kids are performative now and performative about their life because they think they're speaking to an audience. Like I just thought that was really interesting. Hold on. Oh yeah. So I just think that's like it was really interesting. And Tamara, who's like she made another movie, but like the one I really remember is Slums of Beverly Hills because I loved that movie growing up. And it was so deep and great. What was the movie that she did? I'm gonna go on the site real quick and double check it. She did one around the same time as 8th Grade and I guess First Reformed, and they're talking about Trump and they're talking about Private Life. She did Private Life. And
Savages is the one I know. That's the one I've seen at least twice.
You should see Slums of Beverly Hills. It is so funny.
I still need to see it, admittedly, and I will.
It's Natasha. It's Natasha. First time I saw Natasha. What's her name? Not Natasha
Leone.
Yeah, Natasha Leone in something, and it's really dark. Alan Arkin's the dad. Marissa Tomei's in it. It's like not quite a family of grifters, but they're definitely like on the poor end of things. They keep moving, and they're like she's developing. She's gotten big boobs all of a sudden, and like the whole thing's just really good in this kind of grimy way. The thing, I'm gonna like put a link in the comments. Everyone should check this out. It was a Hollywood Reporter roundtable. It is so strange to watch like the guy who wrote I think the second star or the third Star is Born. I don't think it's the most. Oh, no, it must be the most recent one, I guess. But like he's an old Hollywood guy, and Farley is like really towing the line here, right? Because he made something about Mary, but if you remember all the controversy around Green Book, like he's kind of very much set in the old school Hollywood ways.
Oh yeah.
He's just kind of coasting in on there. Like he's great and he's got his own thing going on, but like John Krasinski is not a deep critical thinker, I don't think, when it comes to these kind of things. Like he's just sort of like, yeah, and I made a movie and I decided to make it about like a family story, and he's just kind of there to answer the questions. And then Bo and Tamara are just sitting there like, oof, we are not the people. And it's like an all panel of all white people, so that should be very clear.
Honestly, Drew, this all reminds me of and I personally got a kick out of this because I think Ellis really led it well, was that 2 years ago, that deep fake they did on Collider where Ellis did the round table with all the celebrities. Do you remember that?
I never watched any of the Collider videos. So
okay, this one is worth watching because like they had Ewan McGregor, George Lucas, Tom Cruise, Robert Downey Jr., Jeff Goldblum. And Ellis is moderating this round table, like just like the situation.
Oh, it must be, right? That's what they
do.
Yeah.
Okay. And the deep fakes are goofy looking, which is part of the comedy. But Ellis being the straight man in that situation is what really sold it for me. And I definitely recommend watching it. It was quite.
I think I'm going to check it out because like I know that like the deep fake things became like the huge thing at Collider and kind of like led to a downfall of a lot of stuff, but. In that format, in that context of like, yeah, it would almost be like, movie fights sort of. You're just improvising scenarios with the idea that you're a character. Kind of like that, and I like the idea of Ellis hosting it. He's a genius at what he does. I've seen terrible moderation before. I met Ellis in a scenario where there was not a terrible moderator, but we met at Comic-Con being on a panel together with Hal Rudd called Your Opinion Sucks, Rotten Tomato, where the booker literally called me up being like, we need a woman, and then he called me back an hour later being like, we got another woman, we don't need you. And then like 3 days later called me being like, oh, the other woman dropped. Like I don't think he ever learned my name. And the way he made the panel, and it was Scott Aukerman was the host, was moderating the discussion, but what they had was they had me come out first, and then I wasn't like a no name, whatever, they needed a woman. Then they had Hal and Mark come and sit in front of me, like on the stage. So they were sitting in front of me, obstructing the view of me, and then they had the guy who directed Deadpool come out and talk about that, like, well, I just sat there on stage, but in the back of them, because like the guy, I guess, didn't trust me to like be able to be part of that conversation. So then like the second part of the thing I was in, it was so horrifying and like awkward, and like I'd never been on stage before, let alone Comic-Con. I'd never been like exposed to like that stuff. Came from like a New York, very like, again, magazine, sort of literary, like high-minded, I guess, like editing Rex Reed, me and Vinny like starting a TV website together, but it was all very like print publication, do whatever you want, and like no one's gonna like be toxic towards you. And that was my first experience with like LA culture, and I was like really good. And luckily the nicest thing about it was like Mark and Hal were like mortified. Like you could just tell that they were mortified that this was the way it was playing out.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time like it got, they reintroduced me back into the thing, I just took that mic and I did not shut up for the rest of the panel. Like I didn't give anyone a time to break or talk. I took that mic and I just started ranting my opinions, and I don't think I shut up for like the next 90 minutes. They brought on Fabio, they brought on some other guests, but I just like didn't stop talking like at any point. And it was probably why I was never invited back to Comic-Con, if I had to be honest. But I remember like when I started working at Collider, like Mark came up to me and gave me the biggest hug, and he like looked at me and he was like, "I'm so glad you were here." Like, and he said in this way that I was like, I felt like he meant it, like specifically you. I'm so glad you're here, like remembering the Comic-Con stuff, and I've always really appreciated that about Mark. Like, I don't know.
Oh, I mean, he classes up the joint. That's what his superpower is, and yeah, that deep fake stuff got a little carried away there for a while. But this bit that he did, where Josh Robert Thompson imitated like half the celebrities, he's just so good at being like calm and like just trying to like keep them all reeled in, and they're all just saying random crap, and it's very, very amusing.
I mean, we forget because like it's easy to forget that Mark and like especially Mark though is like doing a facilitator job in the Schmoedown. So like when he's acting a certain way towards certain people, it's because like that's his job as like the straight man to be. Like he's supposed to be like, well, he's not laughing at your jokes because you're not being funny, but because his role is to be like confused.
Can I tell you a quick? I know we got to talk about DePalma, but
do him like next time. Go ahead.
Well, at least Brian DePalma didn't retweet us yet.
Sure.
But I have to say this about Ellis. I've told stories about Ellis before on the air because as a fan, I went and saw him perform a few times. Mm-hmm. And the second time I saw him was in Hartford, Connecticut. And I'll never forget that I was seated at this table with these two random girls who were there seeing the show together. And they were talking and texting during the show. And within like 5 minutes of the show, Ellis called them out from the stage. And they stopped for a minute, and then they started doing it again, and then he made them part of the bit. And I won't ruin. I can't remember like everything he said, but essentially, he called them out again, and one of the girls was like, "Just go back to your comedy, and then of course he wasn't going to let that go, and. Eventually, the two of them just took their leave and walked out. And after the show, I was talking to him, and he just said, "I hope they didn't ruin it for you. I'm really sorry." And he
was even thinking of himself. He was thinking about the audience.
Yeah. So that was quite an experience. And since I've gotten involved in the Schmoedown, he and I have caught up about the times we run into each other at his shows, and he started connecting the dots because we ran into each other in LA when I was out there at one point when he like literally saved a woman and her child from a car that was like speeding into an intersection. Oh yeah. So
is he actually a white knight? Like the non-pejorative term white knight? Like is he actually like the knight of the world? Like he's just down there doing good deeds?
This is why like I feel like the Schmoedown was like something it was inevitable for me, just because Ellis and I kept crossing paths. And the first time I ran into him was in LA. I was out there for a wedding, and I went and saw a movie at the AMC in Burbank. And my friend who I was staying with lived in Burbank at the time. And I was waiting for him to come pick me up by that whole area with Yard House and the theater and everything. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting there waiting on the sidewalk for my friend to pick me up, and I hear the brakes slam on this car. Okay. And I hear people yelling and all this stuff, and I look over, and I see someone guiding this woman and her stroller across the street.
Oh my God.
And then he goes back to the driver and is like, "Pay attention next time," like giving him the business.
Oh my God.
And then I realized it was Mark Ellis, and he came over on the sidewalk, and I was just like, "Hey, Mark Ellis." And he turned around and he's like, What? And I said, "Hey, I happen to be a fan of Jedi Council and all the stuff you do, Schmoedown." And he's like, "Oh, cool, man. Thanks." And he's like, "That was pretty crazy, right?" And we talked about it. And then when I saw his comedy show, in Connecticut, like a year later, I was like, hey, I was that guy in the street, by the way.
Oh my God.
And then when I got involved in the Schmoedown, I reminded him of both things, and he's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't expect him to remember my face, but he remembered the events. And then when he connected the dots, now like he's made these like vague references at times, like he talks about how we're crime fighters together and stuff. I'm like, I was there. You were the one who literally like guided a woman and her child across the street.
My God, he's like one of those like he is like one of those swashbuckling old timey like Errol Flynn type, like where he's just both on stage and off. He's just like a he's just a protector of the weak, and he's not weak. You know what I mean? Like he's a good guy. Like Mark Ellis just reads as a good guy, and there's nothing beyond that. I think there's nothing more to the story than he's just a good guy.
Yeah, he just does not suck.
He's decent. Like he's a decent human being, and it's weird that like that's the standard. But I mean, it's not just like that should be the base minimum. He goes beyond and above, dealing with different personality types, dealing with a lot of, comedy is a hard enough thing, but dealing with comedy plus like the Schmoedown stuff and dealing with different kinds of temperaments and stuff. He's never really. I think I heard Roxy and Kate talking about this once, that like he's had to like reprimand them both when they've been at different times at the Comedy Store because they've gotten too wasted or they were trying to smoke weed in the hallway or something. He's come up and he's just been like, hey, can you cool it, whatever. And they both said like that's the moment that sobered them up more than anything, because you never want to get Mark Ellis disappointed in you, because he'll take you aside and he'll do it very politely. He won't be rude, but like it will just make you feel so bad.
If he's disappointed in you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I never want that, ever.
I would never. I think that would ruin me. I'm not sure if I'd be able to come back from that. If like Mark was like, Drew, I really thought you would do better than this. I thought you'd be better. Like if Mark Ellis told me to be better, like I don't think I'd ever leave the house again.
Well, everything, I mean, the thing is, like, anyone who has a story about Mark, everything tracks the same way, and that's what's so great about him. Now, I'm all about connecting the dots here.
Let's do it.
Why are we like this? I know Ellis is a DePalma fan, at least a casual fan.
I think I got it. Let's see. I think we got it here. Like a lot of DePalma's work. So he's another one that I'm fascinated by, because his stuff goes all over the place. You're like ping pong. Like you go from Carrie to something like what's the one he made about the Iraq War that was sort of around the time of Zero Dark 30 and Hurt Locker, but it was like way worse. You get things like Blow Up, the amazing John Travolta, Nancy Allen, John Lithgow movie. You get like Phantom of the Paradise, one of my favorite movies of all time, which is a rock opera, crazy ass musical that was so horribly received at the time, starring Paul Williams, the guy who wrote most of the Muppet music. So like he's a very small guy. He was in Baby Driver because Edgar Wright was so obsessed with this musical, as was I. It's a retelling of Phantom of the Opera, kind of meets Faust. It's like Faust meets Phantom. It's done in the 70s rock opera way that is like insane. The music is like intense, but it's all being done by the guy who wrote Rainbow Connection. So it's also like bops. Like I played it for Eric, some of the songs. He's like, this sounds a lot like Muppet Babies. So he's like, when you think about it, this sounds like the Muppet Babies theme. And I'm like, that makes sense. Same guy wrote the music, but it's supposed to be like this glam rock, almost like Rocky Horror kind of thing going on.
It's funny you mentioned Jessica Harper from Suspiria and Shock Treatment is in it, and she's a good singer if you've seen Shock Treatment.
Yep. Let's point out, like Jessica Harper. My very first tattoo is of a phoenix because her name in the movie is Phoenix.
Wow.
I love this movie that much. But apparently, I'm not alone. I thought growing up in high school there was just me and my weird friends that were obsessed with this movie because it's good. Like if you're into musicals and you're into certain kinds of aesthetic and you like Rocky Horror, you'll really like this movie. But you can also understand why it flopped and like why no one else liked it. Because it's just all over the place and it's silly and like but it's got like the DePalma. It's also got like such a signature style. There's like split screens while like a musical sequence is happening. So you're like seeing like a bomb in a car like go like be wheeled on stage while simultaneously seeing the perspective of like the people in the audience. Like there's just so much going on. He makes these swings that are just like out of the world. Like they just feel like they're so inventive that like nobody at the time was trying it. So it's really weird to find out that he was so close with Spielberg and Lucas, because they feel like such conventional storytellers in a lot of ways that they're making stories that are accessible for like everyone. Whereas DePalma feels like he's making stories for like the inside of his brain specifically. And like a lot of times the narratives get sort of muddled. Like Carrie, like is a great story and Piper Laurie is incredible in it, but like the Stephen King story, like going back to King, like that was his first book, and it's all told through these clippings and recountings. It's almost like an oral history. Like Carrie's told in the style of an oral history. And while the movie isn't like that, there is this element of like, I don't know, like cinema verite to like Carrie. Like you get that split screen and with the pig's blood and her walking on stage, and the whole thing has this very like surreal, almost like art film kind of quality to it.
Well, there's such raw immediacy to Carrie, not just because of the way it was made by DePalma, but because it was so rapidly adapted and it ended up being good and Oscar nominated for both major actresses in the film. Oh, okay. Yes. Sorry. I got distracted by Jimmy Nails there.
No, it's cool. I did it. Me and Mark Hoyek and Chris Clark and Rachel Silvestrini did a whole episode on shock treatment for PJ's Network, so you should check that out. I loved shock treatment. In high school. Yeah.
But Carrie is such a cool movie because it didn't set out to earn Oscar nominations. At least I don't think so. And De Palma just made a very earnest adaptation of a already very earnest book. Yeah. And Sissy Spacek and Piper Laurie are iconic in film.
And even the small kids, Travolta and Nancy Allen are like they are just so good as the evil people in that movie. They're so good. Like, God, you hate them, but you also like are just really enraptured with like you're really invested in like what they're up to and like their dynamic. Like and the same with like the gym teacher, and the same with the girl who like defects and becomes kind of Carrie's friend, and like the boy who starts to like fall for her, and the whole immediacy. You're right. Immediacy is the perfect word for it. You're just constantly being right there in the world of Carrie. When the door slams, when she's making things happen, when she's like yelling at her mom and her mom's yelling about dirty pillows, you just feel this like the tension is so intense. It feels exactly like being a teenager. It feels like what too many emotions feel like when you're a teenager.
And with all due respect, there are things I like about the new version, but Kimberly Pierce's version didn't resonate with me as much. It just felt a little overproduced, and it didn't seem to cover any new ground, even though there was some good acting in it. The original, the original is just a very strong movie, and it wasn't, and it's early in his career, but he'd already done Phantom of the Paradise by then. The one of his that I still really need to see, especially as a horror fan, is The Fury with Kirk Douglas. I need to see, that's 1978. I really need to see that. But as Body
Double, right? Because that one also has a musical segment we have to talk about.
Yes, I will let you cover that bit. I just wanted to give a shout out to Raising Cain as well, which is an oft-forgot film of his that I like to plug.
I just saw The Untouchables for the first time. Like, just saw it for the first time recently.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, I was like, first of all, the score in this is like to die for. It's like watching the original True Grit for the first time and hearing Bernstein's score. And being like, whoa, music used to be like the scores used to be like way more cinematic in a way. Like, it wasn't just like, here's a cover of like Hallelujah, deal with it. Mm-hmm. There's just like some generic Hans Zimmer noises. Not that there's anything wrong with Zimmer. I'm saying like it kind of blends together after a while. You hear the scores for like The Untouchables or like True Grit, and you're like, oh, that's, or like, you know, a lot of the Coen Brothers scores are like that too. Like, they're just indelible in your mind.
Right.
Like, the music like invokes the movie. I think like E.T. is very much like that because he just played the footage for John Williams and was like, go ahead, like make the music to this instead of like having John Williams go off and make it by himself and then score it, you know, like line it up with the picture. He like had John Williams look at the picture and go, what does this like make you feel? And like, so the music comes together in this very organic, very like transcendent way. And I think De Palma's really good at doing that. That being said, Body Double has the maybe the greatest example of Frankie Goes to Hollywood, better than Zoolander, I think, in my opinion, where a character literally stops what they're doing in the middle of like the climax of a murder mystery, like, and just does a music video for Frankie Goes to Hollywood. No context. Like they're running, like it's melody over, and they're just, and he's an actor, but like they're literally, I think if I remember correctly, he's like in the middle of getting like caught by the bad guy and figuring out the mystery here, and then they just stop and Relax cues up, and suddenly he's in a music video for Frankie Goes to Hollywood's Relax, where the singer of the band shows up and he's like, Relax, go to it, and he's walking around with him, and like they're in a nightclub, and you're like, you're like, did the movie stop? Like, what's happening? Like, it was watching this in high school. I was like, this is very unclear what just happened. Did I get like the wrong movie halfway through, or like, why is it the same actor but like he's just in a music video? It's such a swing, and it's such a weird choice. And he ends up in a coffin, and then the movie continues from there. But like, just like he really wanted to do a music video for Frankie Goes to Hollywood's Relax, so he just stopped the movie and did that in the middle of like the climax of the film, and that's a big dick energy if I've ever seen one.
And that's commonplace nowadays with a lot of filmmakers who have more creative control over their movies. But back then, that was not something you saw.
Right. The needle drop.
Often.
The needle drop was, or like the needle drop is a big thing now. But they won't literally stop the movie to have the characters diegetically understand that they're like in a music video. Like that's the part that's weird. It's like he stops the action. He's not doing action alongside the music that's playing in the background. He's in a music video for Frankie Goes to Hollywood's Relax, and that's like the lead singer comes out and is holding him by the hand and is like walking him through some place. And I don't remember exactly the events, but he's like relaxed, and the guy does like a little jump, and then he does like a little jump, like he's in a song. And it's, I don't know, I think it maybe turns out he was hit on the head or it was a hallucination or something like that. I don't exactly remember the context, but like they just stopped the movie dead. It's like if Harley Quinn, you know, like in the Suicide Squad, it's like if every character just stopped what they were doing to sing Bohemian Rhapsody, you know, like that would be like Freddie Mercury came out of like the brush and was like, everyone just got together and started singing like they're in the Muppets. That would be the equivalent to what happens in the very serious, very like sexually noir, LA noir, you know, Peeping Tom film Body Double. It's fantastic.
Yeah, like if people haven't dug into 80s DePalma, they're depriving themselves. Blowout obviously is deserving of the praise. I'm not a big Scarface guy. I don't hate it, but don't revisit it often. And I think for him to do like, I think Blowout's a better movie overall. Like if you were to compare them, like Blowout might of. And there are still a couple 80s movies of his that I need to brush up on, but of the ones I've seen, Blowout's my personal favorite from that decade.
Blowout is such an important film that I think a lot of people don't realize is being referenced in a lot of their favorite movies.
Mm-hmm.
Blowout is like the genesis of a lot of, you know, was Blowout before the conversation? Because it feels like it must have.
It owes a lot to the conversation, no denying that, but it also specifically, you know, is inspired by, you know, the Ted Kennedy Chappaquiddick situation, and that makes it a very distinct story in and of itself from the conversation.
So yeah, it's basically about a guy who, you know, I think we see this a lot of Hitchcock too. It's like a guy who accidentally stumbles upon a crime, but in this, you know, it's usually like a photographer, I feel like, you know, Rear Window style, and this is an audio engineer who's like, you know, works in horror movies, and he's picking up audio from different like events like just around town in DC, and he hears like a car going up, like while he's recording and gets the audio, he gets the audio of a car going off a bridge and like sinking, you know, and there's an explosion, and there's like, you know, and the question is like, did someone tamper with the car? Like this person was like a politician, there was a woman in the car, like who all these people were, and he's like listening to the audio and sort of figuring it out through, you know, sound. And I think that's like such a cool use of that trope of like a guy accidentally becoming a detective, or like an everyday Joe Schmo like finding themselves wrapped up in a bigger conspiracy, but having it done through specifically the world of film, and specifically the audio side of film. It's like so cool. So
because it's simultaneously engaging the audience on how the film is put together. And a lot of people, especially back then, an audience wasn't thinking consciously about what physically goes into making a movie. And
being aware of what you're hearing, like you being aware of like what you're like icing out, like, or boxing out other noises, so you just hear what he like. You sort of, you're toning your ear like the way he's toning his ear.
And he doesn't have a magic touchscreen back then like movies now. He has to slow down the audio with his reel-to-reel and really dig into it. And it's fascinating the way the camera lingers on the equipment in that movie, the way it lingers on Travolta's face as he's like studying the stuff. And then as the plot bears itself out, and I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but it just escalates in such an interesting, organic way. I think that is a very tight movie in the sense of its pacing and editing, whereas Scarface is it's
simple on object.
It is very much, and it serves its purpose. But I think, like American Psycho, sometimes I think people glean the wrong things from Scarface.
Oh yeah.
And that unfortunately is part of its unintended legacy. DePalma has been very hit or miss later in his career, but 90s DePalma, there was some interesting stuff too. I don't know how much longer we can discuss it.
I'm trying to find a very specific meme because I have something that's like very specific to this, so that's what I'm Googling right now. But I think you're right. I think there's a movie that Toby Jones did that me and Eric saw recently. It was called, oh my God, what was it called? It was called, I'm trying to find it. It has a very strange name, but it's about an audio engineer working in Italian cinema doing horror stuff, and it owes a lot to Blow Out, but it's also just like it does the kind of the same thing, which is just sort of make you focus on the Dolby and the FX, like the SFX or whatever you call it, which is not something you ever think about. Like you just don't. Like I think a lot of us go to movies and we just hear it as like this audio sonic overboom, and we just accept that that's not as important as the stuff that's going through our eyeballs. It's called Sound Studio. That's what it's called. Yeah.
People have no idea. Yeah, like how many, if you're looking at editing software for the uninitiated, how many layers of audio you have to put in there just for sound effects alone.
I refuse to do anything like podcast related because I'm terrified of what my brain will do once it has to start realizing there's like audio levels. Like I will just I'll have a tantrum and like wig out and destroy everything. This is what I found on Reddit once, and I love it so much. I'm gonna try to make it big screen. It says, take away characters that. What does it say? Characters that characters you are not supposed to agree with, people tend to do anyway. Sorry, this isn't the right name. It was sort of like if you like these characters, you took the wrong thing away from this movie.
If you took it literally.
Yeah, you missed the point by idolizing these characters. That's what it is. Very similar meme. I love it because I think that's exactly right. It's the same way like people adopted the phrase red pill to like meme this men's right activism thing, where it's like that term was created by 2 trans women, right? Like
Oh my God.
Like how ridiculous you seem that you're like you're just doing this stuff and you're like quoting the Matrix, but like that was a movie made by 2 trans women. Like, are you?
Well, it's like the Punisher symbol. And I like that the comic book writers have like used the Punisher character to clap back at Proud Boys. I think that's excellent. Yeah. Because I am so sick of seeing that skull with like the iconography used the wrong way.
Yeah, it's just sort of like, you missed the point. If you were idolizing these characters, I'm not even sure if the Joker counts this Joker, because I think Todd Phillips does want you to idolize this version of the Joker. I think that's like why he misses the point. But the rest of them are like literally commentaries on this kind of like obsessive, overly macho character. I mean, written by like Brad Pitt in Fight Club, written by a gay man, like like the one we were just talking
Wolf
about.
Wolf of Wall Street is one where people definitely inferred the wrong thing. It's not.
Yeah. Alex from Clockwork Orange. I don't even know if like people do idolize Alex from Clockwork Orange in this day and age because they're just like, that man looks silly. But like, yeah, I can see that too. It's just sort of like an antisocial thing. Rorschach. Yeah, that guy's supposed to be a right-wing nut job. Like Rick from Rick and Morty. If you really want to be like Dan Harmon, you're gonna like you're designed to just be really sad your entire life. I feel like you're just really sad. Like it is wubba lubba dub dub. Like if that's what you aspire to be, I don't know what to tell you folks. And Travis Bickle, I mean, weird things, but a bunch of the things are having characters that the big twist is they don't go and murder somebody or they go and murder the right person. Like King of Comedy is only weird because it doesn't end like Joker. Like because it ends with him going to jail, but then coming out and being beloved by everyone in a postscript. And the Taxi Driver ends with everyone loving him in a postscript. And it's sort of like, that's not how these antisocial characters would. This feels like not the real ending of the story. Like this is almost like a fantasy ending.
Yeah, well, I mean, the entire Todd Phillips Joker movie is it's got a lot of good performances, good cinematography, a great score, and it's really just a mixed bag of things I've seen in other films.
Jeremy Miller, we're not saying liking the movie is the same thing as idolizing them. In fact, I would say they're completely separate things. We love American Psycho because we recognize it's social satire, but there are people in the world who idolize Patrick Bateman and want to be Patrick Bateman and want to be Tyler Durden and who espouse the belief systems of Tyler Durden, even though Tyler Durden himself is a social commentary and critique of men who act that way. Like the idea of the Fight Club is this like super masculine heteronormative thing when it's like a critique of that exact like hyper violent as a way to prove your manhood ideology is it's like the point of the movie was lost on some people. They didn't understand the satire of it. And that's not to say you can't like these movies. Oh, I like a lot of these movies. It's just saying that if you walked away thinking Tony Montana is who is the good guy, or Walter White, even though he was an incredibly well-written character, is who you should be like, or that that Walter White was correct. If you walk away from Breaking Bad thinking Walter White had the right idea about life and he had the right perspective and he had his ducks in a row and he had the right mindset, then I don't know what to tell you. Like, I don't know what to tell you, man. Yeah.
No,
anyway,
I'm with you, and looks like Marisol picks up on what you're laying down too.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly thought that the real problem with Joker was not the movie itself, which I thought was a lot more restrained than it was going to be, because it was what Todd Phillips was saying so defensively about the movie when people had legitimate concerns about going to a theater to see a movie that was obviously going to involve the Joker with gun violence. When the last time there was a fucking Batman movie, someone came in clown makeup, not Joker makeup, but in clown makeup, and shot up a theater. Like, I could see why, as someone who has an anxiety disorder, just going out in public like that would be scary enough, but going to see a movie in which that kind of stuff is made to look very cool would be. It felt
like a movie engineered to capitalize on all the things people inferred incorrectly about Heath Ledger's performance, and I felt like Joaquin Phoenix was objectively great, but he usually is. I have no issue with him being a talented actor. I just don't. The movie does not hold up under scrutiny when I revisit it. It just doesn't.
What was interesting to me was I actually thought it was a lot more. It was a lot. I think it was Todd Phillips' comments that really were like the stuff that was dangerous. Him calling everyone snowflakes for saying they didn't feel comfortable going to see it. They needed police presence outside of theaters. You know, I didn't feel comfortable seeing it for many months, like in a theater. People were giving me shit about not wanting to see it in a theater when I was like, but I won't have a good experience even if it's a good movie because I will be so nervous about like someone. I'm not saying the movie's bad. I haven't seen it yet. I'm just saying like the situation around it, and his comments are inflaming a social mindset that's saying it's okay to like be that guy. Now, seeing the movie, I actually thought it was a pretty good needle he thread about like the Joker isn't cool. He's somebody who slipped through the cracks of like, it's like sad. He's pathetic. Like he's somebody who slipped through the cracks of the system. He's not being able to like get the mental help he needs. He's like systematically the stuff that should be like universal is being taken away from him, like with the healthcare and his job. And like, you know, he's becoming more marginalized in a way that like, let's say if this was a character that was not a white guy, you'd be like, yeah, this is kind of bringing to light some major issues of the society that we live in. The problem is that Todd Phillips promoted this movie as if it was like edgelord, cool, like, yeah, go be like Joker. And I was like, you made a movie that was a little bit more restrained and a little bit more nuanced than like your actual commentary. So like he could have just shut the fuck up and I would have enjoyed that movie a lot more, I think. Because I also thought that it was going to end in, I could kind of call the King of Comedy thing. I thought it was going to end in a massive theater shooting where he shoots up in the entire audience. And I was like, I don't want to see that in a theater. Like it's going to feel bad. And I was like, okay, it's one person. That almost feels better. He only shoots one person in during a live studio taping. I guess I was being too like, you know, I just primed myself for such horror that like I was almost like, oh, that was very restrained how he just shot that one guy in the head. Very restrained movie. Like, and as an audience member, I don't have to worry about my own life because he's just going to shoot the guy who's hosting the program. Maury.
There you go. I don't know how I can top that, but yeah, there are things I like about the film, like I said, but it's so uneven and so at war with itself in certain moments, and yeah, and then you cannot watch it without thinking of King of Comedy and Taxi Driver the entire time. So.
Not a great depiction of women. I gotta say that. Like, my favorite part of Scarface is the part they bring up in the song "Captain Jack Sparrow" by Lonely Island, where like it's Michael Bolton and he's singing all the lines from the different things. He starts out with Jack Sparrow, but he goes to Scarface and he's like, "I got a basehead wife, but her womb is polluted," and you're just like, "Wait, what? Oh, right, that's
her womb is polluted. What the fuck is this movie? Like Michelle Pfeiffer. It's Michelle Pfeiffer in Scarface. It's Sharon Stone in Casino. That these women are portrayed as such. Just it's like them being drug addicts is worse than their husbands being straight up serial murderers.
And the reason their partners get addicted to drugs desperately is very obvious.
Yeah. No, and then the fact that they are materialistic, or that they like, they were attracted to them in the first place because they have power and money, that is a way more venal sin than the fact that these guys just straight up kill people for a living. That's like what they do. And like that's,
And you know why? I finally recently saw Jonathan Demme's Married to the Mob, which is just such a good rejection of the entire storyline of hers from Scarface, because she plays a widowed mob wife who tries to leave that life behind her, and these people keep bothering her. And it's a dark comedy, but I've been meaning to see that movie for years, and I saw it not too long ago, and it holds up wonderfully. And when you put it in context with her role in Scarface, especially, it's really, really clever filmmaking.
So that I'm just seeing this now. He did the Bruce Springsteen "Dancing in the Dark" music video, right? Like with Courtney Cox. He also did. I'm seeing right after Body Double, he did "Frankie Goes to Hollywood." Relax. He just made. That's why it's in the movie. He actually just made the music video for "Frankie Goes to Hollywood's Relax" and decided he wanted to put it in Body Double, just I guess to like tease it out or something. That's incredible. He also did "Carlito's Way," which is that Stephen King?
No, that's not Stephen King.
Oh, it's David Koepp did the screenplay. Okay, I got you.
And it has a weird little sequel that doesn't have any of the original people in it, or maybe like one of the people. I can't remember.
It's by the guy who wrote After Hours, the Scorsese film, right? Or like it's by his same novel, the same source material, which I guess makes sense. But it reminds me of that Stephen King book that's about a woman is it called Rose Matador, where a woman's trying to escape.
Rose Matter.
Okay, yeah. So it kind of looks like the same. I think for some reason in my head I always confuse the two. They might not have anything to do with each other at all. There might not be a woman in this at all. But I think as a kid, I saw like the Carlito's Way poster and assumed it was Rose Matter. Not related to each other, but I don't even actually know what Rose Matter is about. Looks kind of like Serpico-y.
I think Stephen King's going to be a regular topic every week. I haven't read Rose Matter. That's one of the Stephen King books I haven't gotten to, so maybe we'll cover it in a future episode.
Oh, Carlito's Way seems like it's just Scarface. It's just Scarface. It looks like. Have you seen it? I haven't seen it, but it looks like it's just the movie Scarface all over again. So I mean, yeah, I think the fact that he started with Carrie that's his big first one, makes me a lot more sympathetic to how he portrays women in his later films, because he obviously does have such a good grasp of the female experience. But then there's also like Dressed to Kill, which is a product of its time, but definitely wouldn't hold up today. Like Michael Caine in Dressed to Kill is not. No spoilers for what Dressed to Kill is about, but it would very much not fly today the way that it's written and portrayed about a woman, blonde woman wearing a big hat who's in an elevator who shoots the guy, and it's about somebody who witnesses the crime and trying to figure out who did it. Michael Caine plays the psychiatrist, and just if you've seen Slumber Party Massacre, you kind of know where I'm going with this. It's not very cool in what it's trying to say, but I get that it's a product of its time. So I feel more like it's the stuff recently that he's done that I've heard about. Like I don't love Black Dahlia, but it didn't have like an issue with me. I just feel like he hasn't really caught up with the times, and I guess that's it's harder when you get older.
He might still be heard over Coppola and Scorsese shoving him out of the film club with Lucas and Spielberg. What's that?
Sorry, one second. He was with Spielberg and Lucas and Scorsese?
No, but I not necessarily, but I know that Coppola and Scorsese are kind of in that unofficial club with Lucas and Spielberg, and I feel like DePalma's the odd man out in a lot of ways.
You're right, because in this documentary, they kept interviewing DePalma, and he was in all the footage, and I was like, I had no idea that he was friends with them. And Scorsese was in that a lot. Scorsese was more like, him and Lucas were like, we didn't really think much of Spielberg. We kind of thought, like, we are doing bad boy grunge stuff, and Spielberg's over there being, like, the goody two-shoes. Like, and I thought that was funny. I was like, yeah, but like, oh, how the turntables, George Lucas, like whatever. But like, it kind of annoyed me after a while that like the gatekeepingness of like these rebel bad boys have like turned into like the standardized thing. But
Right.
yet, Paula was a very weird person that was like in all the footage. He was like in all the archival footage was just DePalma hanging out with them. And right, it feels like they kind of like middle schoolers going to high school, like they just decided that he wasn't their friend anymore and he's no longer associated with them.
Well, he can come hang out with us. I know he doesn't have Twitter, but put out the good word. You have a knack for getting a hold of people, so maybe we can get DePalma on here to talk about Domino, starring Nikolai Coster-Waldau, that no one talks about from like a year or two ago.
I think he has 2 new ones coming out, right? Let me see. Sweet Vengeance is in pre-production and Catch and Kill. You know what they are? Let's talk about it. He hasn't really done that much since 2006. He just did Redacted, Passion, Domino, and then these upcoming ones. He did Snake Eyes with Nick Cage and Mission to Mars or Ghost to Mars.
Yeah, he did Mission to Mars and Snake Eyes.
And Mission
then,
Impossible.
Yeah, the first Mission Impossible as well. But going back to Raising Cain, if people haven't seen it, the thing about that movie is if you like Split and you haven't seen Raising Cain, you really need to go see Raising Cain because John Lithgow does what James McAvoy does, but way before. And it's a bit more pulpy, even by Shyamalan standards. It's more pulpy than that. But John Lithgow is someone I wish would have a slice in the Schmoedown someday because I love how varied his work is, and I like his range, and I like how he is a talented character actor, but he can be very subtle as well. And Raising Cain allows him to be multiple personalities in a very interesting way, and it has that DePalma pulp that I find very entertaining.
It's funny because he appears earlier in Blowout, but like his role is very like in the shadows, like whatever. But I never think of Lithgow as a character actor, but he is. Of course he's a character actor. That's what he does. He plays like certain tropes very well. Like he's the bad guy or he's like the good guy. I remember him mostly as a kid from Third Rock from the Sun. That's like my Lithgow experience was like watching him and Joseph Gordon-Levitt and, French Stewart pretend to be aliens with Jane Curtis.
That was my point of entry. Well, actually, no, Harry and the Hendersons. And then when I saw Third Rock from the Sun, I was like, that's the dad from Harry and the Hendersons. And then, fast forward a few years to, one of my favorite performances of his ever was Dexter. I just loved him in that season. Thought it was great.
Oh, yeah.
And then you go back and see how good he is in like all of his older films. He got nominated for playing a transgender woman in The World According to Garp. He's very good in that. Yeah, and then Blowout, like we mentioned, and then Brian De Palma brought him back because he was so frightening in Blowout. Why not make him center stage as like a really interesting, frightening character in Raising Cain? So,
and I remember like in All That Jazz, he has a very small part in Bob Fosse's All That Jazz, one of my favorite musicals of all time. I mean, favorite just movies of all time.
All That Jazz is so good. People go see it if you haven't seen it.
Oh my God, guys, really see All That Jazz. It's Bob Fosse predicting his own death, exactly how he was going to go, like I think a year or two later. But it's a deep meditation on death and life, and it's where, if you've ever seen like the It's Showtime thing that Bob Odenkirk does in the beginning of Better Call Saul, or like what Beetlejuice is doing, it's taken from All That Jazz. It's when he's popping amphetamines in the mirror and going, "It's showtime."
I can't remember who I saw on Twitter say something about how they've been going around telling young people that that All That Jazz is a sequel to Jaws, and it makes them so happy. And
that's really funny.
Yeah, like
Shire, not that much stuff, I guess, for young people.
But if Cabaret is a great movie, but All That Jazz is superior in my opinion because it encompasses so much about filmmaking and stage production, and how Bob Fosse was that unique bridge between the two.
It has the most incredible end sequence, most gut-wrenching end sequence. It's a 7-minute long musical sequence of basically his hope, the last synapses of his brain firing in a certain way, and done in this hallucinatory stage setting of like and they're doing the song "Bye Bye Love," which is that old I think what Esterly Brothers song or Esterly Brothers or whatever.
Everly Brothers.
Everly Brothers. And it's him and Ben Vereen, the guy from Zoobly Zoo, so Christian would love it. And he was in the original Pippin, so Bob Fox's friend. And they're putting on this performance, and then he's going in the audience and saying goodbye to everyone, like everyone in his life. Like I get teared up thinking about it, but like he's saying goodbye to his ex-wife and to his kid, and he's like, at least I won't have to hurt you anymore. Like, you know, he's saying goodbye to John Lithgow, who is his rival for like getting these stage productions, and this guy was just standing up like at ostensibly this own guy's like death imagination, whatever, and he's just very curtly being like, yeah, like whatever, like he still can't like give it to him. And it's just like this very small moment of Lithgow just still being like an asshole.
Right.
Because he's had like one scene, but like he just puts in that kind of level of performance. This is not spoiling all that jazz, by the way. It's a death trip of a movie, but it's impossible to watch, I think, without crying. If you can do it without crying, I think you are probably failing the like, you know, Von Comp test or whatever from Blade Runner, and you are probably a replicant.
But I will say this: if people haven't seen Cabaret, I would recommend for a little more. All that jazz is good on its own. It definitely is. But I do think, at the bare minimum, people should see Cabaret first, and then see all that jazz.
Yeah.
I'm with Garth on the title.
Yeah, there was a question I think in Schmoedown. It definitely was a question that was like, was somebody's 3-pointer, and it was like it was Joel Grey won this, and I went the Cabaret because Joel Grey was.
Oh yeah.
Joel Grey just is not in that many movies, and he never won for anything. He was in Dancer in the Dark, I guess, but like if you say Joel Grey, it's Cabaret.
You know, Dean Stockwell's performance in Blue Velvet always reminded me of Joel Grey in Cabaret in this weird way. Yeah.
What it was based on. I think if I remember correctly, I believe that's who they modeled that one scene on with the lampshade.
That's the first time I've heard that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just it's very evocative.
Guys, I think we've been going on now. God, yeah, I feel like we could just talk for hours about anything, and
we'll get to the animatronic fox next time.
I just don't know what you're talking about with the same.
It's one of my favorite clickhole articles of all time about Splash Mountain. So I will.
Oh my god! I didn't know what you were talking about. I'm so excited to read this. Awesome. Adam, where can people find you?
At Eisenthor on Twitter and Letterboxd are my preferred social media presences. And I have a match coming up soon with JTE on a pay-per-view. So check that out. But otherwise, I'm here every other week on Saturdays doing Why Are We Like This for as long as Drew will have me. So I'll be here. I'll see you in 2 weeks, people.
Yeah, I'll see you in 2 weeks. You know what? I saw in the comments Jesse Swift wants to be on this. I know we've actually gotten a lot of requests from people who really do want to be on the show. So maybe we'll talk about maybe bringing a guest on for next week or the following weeks. I do want to start having people on to talk about their cultural, what makes them the way they are. I find it very fascinating. Adam, it's always a pleasure. You can find me, VideoDrew, across all social platforms. It's one word. I do shows here basically every night. I am going to start be doing a thing where I'm going to be doing alternating weeks for Live in the Dark. So when we are doing Why Are We Like This, I won't be doing shows on Sunday nights just to speed up my schedule a little bit. So you can always find out my current schedule on Patreon. I have a match as well against downtown Griffey Newman. I'm excited. I really am a big fan of his mother, downtown Julie Brown. Love Earth Girls Are Easy. So it's going to be a fun match. I heard he knows a little bit about movies, so we'll see about that. Otherwise, yeah, have a good rest of your weekend all. And I think we have some end credits, some new end credits. So thank you, everyone. And we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.